Assembly, which requires it to provide assistance and protection to Palestinian refugees pending a just and lasting solution to their plight. The Colonna report reconfirmed that UNWRA is irreplaceable and it is indispensable to Palestinians' human and economic development. And Ireland, I want to say this, is committed to safeguarding UNWRA's critical role. UNWRA remains the backbone of the humanitarian effort in Gaza, and it is a vital force for stability in the region. Ireland has been unequivocally clear that no other agency can replace UNWRA. UNWRA, as well as the wider UN system, have regrettably become targets for heightened disinformation and accusations in the course of this conflict, and this has emboldened physical attacks on the UN, including recent arson attacks on UNWRA's East Jerusalem headquarters and other ongoing efforts to undermine the agency. We all need to be part of the solution in support of UNWRA's efforts to further strengthen its neutrality mechanisms and wider systems. The Colonna review showed that UNWRA has a more developed approach, mechanisms and procedures than other agencies to ensure adherence with humanitarian principles. UNWRA has also welcomed and has committed to and is already progressing the report's recommendations, and despite this, in some cases, new resourcing is being made conditional on the agency demonstrating significant progress on implementing those recommendations. Underinvesting now will increase, not decrease, risks for the thousands of lives dependent on UNWRA in Gaza. Underinvesting also undermines preparations for the day in between. If the ceasefire called for a Security Council Resolution 2735 is enacted, it also undermines UNWRA's capacity to support reconstruction, as well as weakening its work to further strengthen its neutrality mechanisms. In 2023, Ireland provided €18 million to UNWRA, tripling our annual commitment, and this February we provided a further €20 million. We welcome the resumption of funding by almost all member states and the European Commission's payment of €66 million of its planned €82 million for 2024. So we encourage all others to increase their support, to lift remaining suspensions, and to lift restrictions on funding for UNWRA's Gaza programming. We also encourage multi-year funding commitments. We continue to call for an immediate and sustainable humanitarian ceasefire, and we also continue to call for all parties to the conflict to fully comply with their obligations under international humanitarian law and for full, safe, and unimpeded access of humanitarian aid for the civilian populations. Accountability for all civilian deaths, including those of UNWRA's staff, is essential. UNWRA services will remain vital in all stages of this conflict and throughout the journey towards a lasting and sustainable peace based on the two-state solution. Thank you.
I thank the Minister of State with responsibility for communications and circular economy of Ireland. And I now invite to the floor Mr. Pasi Helman, Under-Secretary of State of Finland.
Thank you, Chair, Mr. President of the General Assembly, Mr. Commissioner General, Excellencies. I wish to thank UNWRA and its staff for their commitment and tireless efforts to provide desperately needed humanitarian assistance to Gaza, as well as essential services and protection to the Palestine refugees, despite enormous challenges and extremely difficult and dangerous working environment. I also wish to express deep condolences for the loss of civilian life, among them almost 200 UNRWA staff. The humanitarian situation in Gaza is catastrophic, with health systems close to collapse, high risk of famine looming, etc. We thank UNRWA for the efficient work done both in delivery of aid under severely stretched resources, and also appreciate attempts to diversify its donor base both towards new partner countries and to private sector. Finland is a long-term partner with UNRWA and provides flexible multi-year funding, €5 million annually. Finland has also joined the shared commitments on UNRWA. We underline the vital role UNRWA plays in providing life-saving assistance to generations of Palestine refugees in accordance with its GA mandate. We appreciate UNRWA's close cooperation with the independent review group and the concrete measures to implement its recommendations presented in the action plan. Finland attaches great a priority to efficient risk management and oversight. We have also conducted our own risk reviews on all humanitarian organizations we give core funding to, including UNRWA. And based on the results, we are channeling 500,000 euros this year for strengthening of UNRWA's risk management system. We hope this helps UNRWA to restore its credibility and the trust of its partners in these difficult circumstances. And we urge the Israeli authorities to allow UNRWA to continue carrying out its crucial work in line with its mandate. Finland values the important role of UNRWA in providing services and protection for Palestine refugees. Now, in Gaza, the number of people with disabilities, injuries, and psychological traumas has dramatically increased. We encourage UNRWA to continue its good work in focusing on those in most vulnerable situations. I thank you.
I thank the Undersecretary of State of Finland. And I now invite the distinguished representative of Iceland.
Mr. President, the humanitarian situation in Gaza is nothing short of horrifying. Tens of thousands of civilians have been killed, including close to 200 UNRWA staff. More than 2 million civilians are in desperate need of life-saving aid. 9 out of 10 have been internally displaced. Access for humanitarian aid, water and power is severely hindered. Civilian infrastructure is in ruins. The catastrophic toll this conflict has taken on children and youth is especially heartbreaking to witness. As has been highlighted so many times, there are no safe spaces in Gaza. All of Gaza's children have been subjected to the traumatic horrors of war with life-lasting consequences. All parties to the conflict need to comply with international law, including international humanitarian law, and breaches thereof must be investigated. It is likewise critical that Israel abide by the orders of the International Court of Justice. Iceland has long called for an immediate ceasefire, a surge in humanitarian aid, and the release of all hostages. We have welcomed the adoption of Security Council Resolution 2735 and urge both parties to fully implement it without delay. The fighting and suffering must end now. Mr. President, UNRWA's role responding to the current humanitarian crisis is unique. Not only are UNRWA's efforts in providing life-saving aid to the people of Gaza essential, but the agency also provides the backbone for all other humanitarian response in the area. I take this opportunity to extend our sincere thanks to UNRWA's leadership and staff for their dedicated work during these extremely difficult and life-threatening times. Iceland highly appreciated the swift actions by the agency and the Secretary General to serious allegations of UNRWA staff being involved in the heinous terrorist attack on Israel on October 7 last year. We have the fullest confidence in the ongoing OIOS process and welcome UNRWA's immediate response to the review led by Madam Colonna. Mr. President, Iceland is a long-standing supporter of UNRWA's mandate. Our core support consists of unearmarked predictable funding. Through a multi-year framework agreement at the high-level meeting in Jordan last month, the government of Iceland announced an additional 100 million Icelandic kronas contribution to UNRWA. This brings this year's overall contributions to humanitarian assistance to 290 million Icelandic kronas, which is the equivalent of $2.1 million. Reflecting our commitment to UNRWA's work, Iceland joined other states, 180 states, and signed the shared commitments on UNRWA. We have likewise joined the call to action for Palestinian children in the West Bank and Gaza. Mr. President, for 75 years, UNRWA has fulfilled its mandate that we, the General Assembly, provided it with. In the absence of a lasting political solution, UNRWA's role remains of critical importance. It must be allowed and enabled to continue to deliver on its role. It is a matter of life and death. And I thank you.
I thank the distinguished representative of Iceland, and I now invite the distinguished representative of Egypt, His Excellency.
خالص الشكر سيد الرئيس السيد دينيس فرانسيس السيد فيليب لازاريني المفوض العام للأونروا أتقدم لكم سيد لازاريني ولكل العاملين في الأونروا بالتحية والتقدير لشجاعتكم وتفانيكم الذي وصل إلى حد التضحية بالنفس في سبيل دعم الشعب الفلسطيني في خضم الحرب الغاشمة التي تشنها إسرائيل على غزة. فيليب لازاريني، أنت وزملاؤك أبطال سيذكركم التاريخ بحروف من نور. بينما نناقش في اجتماعنا اليوم سبل دعم وكالة الأونروا في هذا التوقيت الحرج، تواجه الأونروا وواجهت حربا بالمعنى الحرفي للكلمة.
UNWRA is at the moment facing a real war. Israel killed
في جريمة نكراء غير مسبوقة تستوجب التحقيق والمساءلة
unprecedented crimes,
اعتقلت
and
العشرات
there need to be
ودمرت
investigations, there needs to be accountability. More than 180 facilities have been destroyed in the West Bank and East Jerusalem belonging to UNWRA.
فضلا عن مساعي تشريعية لسن قوانين
The Israeli
تهدف
operations
لتجريم
continue.
الأونروا
There
واسمها
are
بالإرهاب.
legislative efforts
هذا
underway to
وهنا
try to
نتساءل عن سبب
incriminate
تعرض
UNWRA
الوكالة
and call it
لتلك
a
الهجمة
terrorist
الإسرائيلية دون
organization.
باقي
Why
أجهزة وكالات
is UNWRA
الأمم
the
المتحدة؟
only
الإجابة
agency targeted by
هي ما
Israeli
سبق وأن أشار
attacks?
إليه السيد
The
لازاريني بأن
response
الوكالة
has
مستهدفة
already been
بسبب
provided to
دورها
us
في
by Mr.
حماية
Lazzarini,
حقوق
namely
لاجئي
UNWRA is
فلسطين
targeted
ولأنها
because of
تجسد
its role
التزاما
in protecting the
دوليا
rights of the
بالحل السياسي.
Palestinian people and
تطالبكم
the
مصر، تطالب مصر
refugees,
المجتمع الدولي
and
بالتصدي
it
بحزم
incarnates
للحرب
the
الإسرائيلية على
international commitment
الأونروا،
to
تلك
a
الحرب غير
political
المسبوقة
solution. Egypt
والتي تعد
therefore
سابقة
calls for
للهجوم على
an
موظفي
end
ومقرات الأمم
to this
المتحدة.
Israeli war
يجب
against
علينا أن
UNWRA. It
نحفظ
is an
للأمم المتحدة
unprecedented war
وموظفيها
against
حرمتهم
UNWRA. This is the first
وحصاناتهم.
time that
سيد الرئيس،
UN staff have been
تقوم
attacked
الأونروا
in this
منذ
way.
بداية الحرب على
It
غزة
is
بدور
incumbent upon us
أساسي
to protect
لتقديم
these
الدعم
people.
الإنساني ليس
Since
فقط لاجئين
the start of the
فلسطينيين
war in
لكل
Gaza,
سكان
UNWRA has
القطاع.
played a key
فالأونروا
leading role
تحولت
in providing
وهي
assistance to
أساس العمل
Palestinian
الإنساني في
refugees
غزة.
and
بدونها
indeed to
بدون
all Gazan
تضحياتها
inhabitants.
لا يمكن
UNWRA
تخيل كيفية
carries out the
دعم
main
المدنيين
humanitarian
العزل
work
في
in
غزة.
Gaza. Without
في هذا
these
السياق تعرض
sacrifices,
مصر عن
without
قلقها
this,
مما ذكره
could
المفوض العام
unarmed civilians could have
خلال
been
اجتماعات اللجنة
helped in
الاستشارية في
Gaza
جنيف
at
بأن
all?
النداء
No.
الذي أطلقته
There was
الوكالة
the
لجمع
advisory committee meeting
مليار
in
و2
Geneva. There was
مليار
a
دولار
call from
لمواجهة حالة
UNWRA
الطوارئ في الأراضي
to
الفلسطينية
mobilize
لم يتم
$1.2
تغطيته سوى
billion
بنسبة
to meet the urgent
18%
needs
بالمئة فقط.
has only been
تطالبكم
funded
مصر
at
وتطالب
an
كل المانحين
18%.
بتفهم
So
الدور غير
Egypt would
الطبيعي
call upon you
والتاريخ
and
الذي
all
تقوم به
donors
الوكالة
to understand
بسبب الحرب
the
على غزة وما
extraordinary
يفرضها
historic role that
عليها هذا
UNWRA
الدور من
plays
أعباء
and
مالية
the key role
يتعين
it plays in this war
الاستجابة
in
لها
Gaza.
بصورة
It
فورية.
absolutely
لا
has
تتركوا
to be
الأونروا
financed fully and
بمفردها إزاء
urgently.
ذلك العدوان
Let us
الإسرائيلي
not
الغاشم. لا
leave UNRWA
تتركوا
alone
الشعب الفلسطيني
facing
للمجاعة.
the brutal
ارتباطا
Israeli
بمسألة
aggression. Let us
التمويل
not
ودور
leave the
الأونروا
people in
تحيي
Gaza in
مصر
the
كل ما
trap of
بذلته
famine.
الوكالة من
Egypt
جهود
commends
مقدرة
the
لمعالجة
efforts
الادعاءات
of
التي
the
وجهت عدد
agency
موظفيها
to address
ارتباطا
allegations
بأحداث
against
7 من
UNRWA
أكتوبر
employees
وتحيي
regarding their
تفاعل
participation in the
الأونروا مع
October the
التوصيات
7th
التي
events. We
قدمتها
also commend the fact that UNRWA
كاترين
has
كولونا
accepted the
بشأن حياد
recommendations
الوكالة وأيضا
from
مع
Ms.
التحقيقات
Colonna
التي يجريها مكتب خدمات
the
الرقابة
objectivity
الداخلية
of UNRWA
OIOS.
and also
وتشدد
investigations
مصر على أمرين.
started
الأول
elsewhere.
أنه لا
Here
توجد
we'd
أي
like to
منظمة أممية أو
reiterate 2
دولية أو
points.
حتى هيئة
No
حكومية
UN organization,
بمنع
no
عن تصرفات
governmental
فردية غير
body,
مسؤولة.
no
ثانيا
NGO
لا يجب الاستناد
is
لبعض التجاوزات
safe
الفردية
from
لوصف تلك
individual
الوكالة
abuse
العظيمة
being carried
بالإرهاب
out by its
ومحاولة
employees.
خنق تمويلها،
Secondly,
بل إن
this is a
استمرار
historic
التمويل
agency and it
وزيادته في هذه
cannot be
الظروف
deemed a terrorist
الحرجة هو الأوجب، ويجب أن يكون ذلك نابعا من التزامنا بقضية اللاجئين الفلسطينيين وحقوق الشعب الفلسطيني. سيد الرئيس، الأونروا وكالة لا غنى عنها لدعم اللاجئين الفلسطينيين لتخفيف من حدة الأزمة الراهنة في غزة، ولقد أثبتت الوكالة في هذا الظرف الحرج مدى كفاءتها وحيوية دورها بعد أن ضحى موظفوها بأرواحهم تلبية للواجب. تشدد مصر على أنه لا يمكن بأي حال من الأحوال استبدال الأونروا ونقل مهامها لأي وكالة أو جهاز أممي آخر. لم تقبل مصر أي سيناريوهات تستهدف تفكيك الوكالة تحت أي ذرائع باطلة تسوقها إسرائيل أو غير إسرائيل. تناشدكم مصر حماية الأونروا والحفاظ عليها في مناطق العمليات الخمس. الشعب الفلسطيني لم ولا يرغب في البقاء في حالة اللجوء بكل تلك العقود، ففرض عليهم وضع اللجوء بسبب الحرمان من أبسط الحقوق المتمثلة في إنهاء الاحتلال الإسرائيلي. والإنهاء هذا الوضع برمته يجب أن يكون هناك التزام بتنفيذ مقررات الشرعية الدولية، إيجاد حل الأزمة الفلسطينية بهدف إنهاء الاحتلال وإنشاء الدولة الفلسطينية المستقلة على حدود الرابع من يونيو 67 وعاصمتها القدس الشرقية. إنقاذ حل الدولتين واجب سيد الرئيس. دعونا نستثمر في السلام ودعونا نستثمر في الأمل كما قالت وزيرة خارجية سلوفينيا، لتركزوا وتتناولوا وتنظروا ماذا فعلت الأونروا لإحياء الأمل في نفوس الفلسطينيين. كل الشكر سيد الرئيس.
I thank the distinguished representative of Egypt. I now give the floor to the distinguished representative of Jordan.
سيد الرئيس، أشكركم على عقد المؤتمر الهام دعما لوكالة إغاثة وتشغيل اللاجئين الفلسطينيين الأنروا، واسمحوا لي أن أثني على جهود الأمين العام الحثيثة في مساندة الأنروا، خاصة في هذا الظرف المأساوي الذي يعيشه الشعب الفلسطيني. ولا يفوتني إلا أن أشكر المفوض العام للوكالة السيد فيليب لازاريني على إحاطته القيمة، وأن أشيد بالجهود الكبيرة والمقدرة في دعم عمل الوكالة التي يبذلها لتتمكن من تنفيذ تفويضها الأممي، خاصة في ضوء التحديات المركبة التي تواجهها الأنروا في الأرض الفلسطينية المحتلة. السيد الرئيس، ينعقد هذا المؤتمر لهذا العام في الوقت الذي تشهد فيه استمرار حرب إسرائيل البربرية على قطاع غزة، والتي راح ضحيتها إلى يومنا هذا نحو 40,000 من الأبرياء، معظمهم من النساء والأطفال، منهم ما يقارب عن 200 من موظفي الأنروا والعاملين في المجال الإنساني. ولعل أحد أفظع الجرائم التي تعمد إسرائيل اقترافها من اندلاع الحرب قبل نحو 9 أشهر هو فرضها لإجراءات انتقامية أحادية تستهدف انهيار نظام الإنساني في غزة وتجويع أهلها، واستمرار عدوان إسرائيل على أهل غزة ومنعها إدخال المساعدات وتوزيعها وتقييدها لقدرة الأنروا في القيام بواجبها في خدمة أهالي غزة واستهدافها المدارس والمستشفيات والمنشآت الأممية وموظفيها. هذا لا يمثل خروقات جسيمة لالتزامات إسرائيل الدولية وأحكام القانون الدولي الإنساني وقرارات مجلس الأمن فحسب، بل مجازر بشرية يجب محاسبة إسرائيل عليها. السيد الرئيس، نأمل أن يسهم مؤتمرنا هذا في توفير الدعم اللازم المالي الذي تحتاجه الوكالة، والذي تفوق أهمية توفيره اليوم أي وقت مضى، خاصة في ظل وصول العجز المالي من ميزانية الأنروا إلى مستويات غير مسبوقة. وتحتاج الوكالة إلى 1.2 مليار دولار حتى نهاية العام بموجب النداء الطارئ الأخير لتتمكن من تغطية الاحتياجات الإنسانية في الأرض الفلسطينية المحتلة، والذي لم يتم تمويل سوى 18 أو 19% منه بحسب آخر الإحصائيات. أؤكد أن ادعاءات إسرائيل وممارساتها ضد الوكالة هو جزء من منهجية منظمة تتبعها إسرائيل منذ عقود لإنهاء الوكالة وتصفية قضية اللاجئين الفلسطينيين. ونثمن موقف المجتمع الدولي وإدراكه لأهمية الاستمرار في دعم الوكالة على الرغم من الاتهامات التي كيلت لها. ونرحب هنا بمخرجات تقرير مجموعة المراجعة المستقلة
of
والذي
agency's
برهن
independent
زيف
review group
الادعاءات المغرضة
demonstrated the
ضدها
false claims
عبر
against the
تأكيده
agency.
على
It
حياديتها
stressed that the
ومهنيتها
agency is neutral
ودورها
and
الرئيس
professional. It
الذي
also
لا غنى
underlined
عنه
its
فضلا عن
indispensable
تأكيد
role.
التقرير
The
بضرورة
report
زيادة
also
المساهمات المالية
stressed the need to
للوكالة.
increase financial contribution
السيد
to the
الرئيس
agency.
يقف
Mr.
الأردن
President,
بكل إمكانياته مع الوكالة
Jordan supports
وسنواصل
the
جهودنا
agency
من
with
أجل
all
توفير
its
الدعم
abilities. We
السياسي
will
والمالي
continue our
اللازم
effort to
لها.
provide the necessary
وكان
political
آخر
and
تلك
financial
الجهود
support to the
استضافة
agency.
الأردن
The last of our
بالشراكة مع
efforts
جمهورية
was when
مصر
we
العربية
co-hosted
والأمم
along with
المتحدة
Egypt
بمؤتمر
and the
الاستجابة
UN
الإنسانية الطارئة في غزة
the humanitarian
الشهر
emergency
الماضي
response
بحضور 75
conference
دولة والذي دعا
for
إلى
Gaza
توفير
last
التمويل
month.
المستدام
It was attended
وطويل
by
الأمد
75 countries. It's
الأمد
called for
لتمكين
long-term
الأنروا من
sustainable
القيام
funding
بواجبها
for
في غزة
UNWRA so that it can
وجميع
undertake
مناطق
its
عملها
duties in Gaza
بما في
and
ذلك
all
من خلال
other
أنشطة
areas
التعافي
of
المبكر في القطاع.
operations, including through the early
السيد
recovery
الرئيس يعمل الأردن
activities
مع
in
السويد
the
والأنروا
Gaza Strip.
وبرعاية
We
مجموعة
work
من
with
الدول
Sweden and
الصديقة على
UNWRA and
تنظيم
other
اجتماع وزاري خلال
countries
الأسبوع
to
رفيع المستوى
organize a
للجمعية
ministerial
العامة أيلول
meeting
القادم
on the sidelines of
ساعيا
high-level
لتوفير الدعم اللازم للوكالة.
meetings of next
وقد عملنا
September for the
بالشراكة مع
General
النرويج
Assembly,
العام الماضي
and this to
على
provide the
مشروع
necessary
قرار
support
تبنته
to
الجمعية
the
العامة
agency. We
لضمان
also
تمويل النفقات
worked along with
التشغيلية
Norway
للوكالة من
on a
الميزانية
draft
العامة
resolution that will be
للأمم
adopted by the
المتحدة
General Assembly
وبشكل
to
تدريجي
include
ومستدام.
the financing of the
وأطلق
operational
الأردن
activities of the
كما
UNWRA
ذكر
from the
عدة
regular
مرات
budget of
اليوم
the United
إلى جانب
Nations
سلوفينيا
gradually
والكويت
and
ومجموعة
in a
الدول
sustainable
الأعضاء من
manner.
الدول الأعضاء في الأمم المتحدة وثيقة
Jordan, along with
الالتزامات المشتركة
Slovenia and
للأنروا
Kuwait and
والتي
another
انضمت
group
إليها
of
أكثر
friendly
من
countries,
118
has
دولة
launched
وذلك في
the
تأكيد
common
على أهمية
commitment
حشد
document of
الدعم
the UNWRA, which
السياسي
included more than
للوكالة ودورها
118 countries.
المركزي في
It
المنطقة
aims at
وعن
mobilizing
صون
political
ولايتها
support to the
وتعزيز
agency,
قدراتها فضلا عن صون
underlying
ولايتها
its
وتعزيز
central role
قدراتها.
in the region to
ختاما السيد
promote its
الرئيس
mandate
نؤكد على
and
أن الأنروا هي
build its
وكالة
capacity.
إنسانية
To
لا
conclude,
يمكن
Mr. President,
الاستعادة
we
عنها
reiterate
ولا
that
تستطيع أي
the UNWRA is an
منظمة أخرى
indispensable
أن تقوم
humanitarian
بما
agency. No
تستطيع
other
الأنروا عمله
organization
ليس
can
فقط من
undertake
خلال
its
تقديم
tasks.
المساعدات
This
الإنسانية
is not only for the
وتوزيعها
provision and distribution of
ولكن أيضا
humanitarian
من خلال
assistance,
توفير خدمات
but
الرعاية
thanks to
الصحية
the
والتعليم
healthcare,
والإمدادات
education,
الأساسية
and
الأخرى.
basic services provided by the agency.
وبرهنت الأنروا على مدى
The
العقود
UNWRA, over the
مركزية
past
دورها
decades,
واستحالة الاستغناء عن
demonstrated its
الخدمات
central
التي
role. Its
تقدمها
services are
بفاعلية
indispensable as
لملايين
it provides
اللاجئين
its
وفي مناطق
effort with
عملها
efficiency and
كافة.
effectiveness to millions of
ونؤكد أن
refugees
دعم
in
المجتمع
all fields of
الدولي لميزانية
operations.
الوكالة
We stress
وقدرتها
that the international
هو دعم
community
لحياة
support to
ملايين
the agency
اللاجئين
and its budget and
الفلسطينيين
capacity is support to
ومستقبلهم
the lives,
وحقوقهم
future
الراسخة
and fundamental
وأهمها
rights of
الحق في
millions
العودة
of refugees,
والتعويض
most
في
important
إطار
of which
حل
is the
شامل
right of return and reparation
للقضية
for
الفلسطينية
refugees.
على أساس
This
حل
comes
الدولتين
along the lines
وفقا
of
لقرارات
a
الشرعية
comprehensive solution to the
الدولية.
Palestinian question
شكرا
on the
السيد
basis of the
الرئيس.
two-state solutions in line with the resolutions of international legitimacy. Thank you, Mr. President.
I thank the distinguished representative of Jordan. I now give the floor to the distinguished representative of Malaysia.
Thank you, Mr. President. Malaysia thanks Commissioner General Lazzarini for his comprehensive update and commends his strong leadership of UNWRA. Malaysia recognizes the indispensable role of UNWRA in supporting Palestinians, more so in the current situation of humanitarian catastrophe. UNWRA is a lifeline for the Palestinians and a symbol of hope for many dependent on it. Hence, we must strive to ensure no disruptions to UNWRA's work. Malaysia welcomes the resumption of contributions by almost all donors to UNWRA. We commend those who have stepped up to sustain UNWRA's life-saving role. You have demonstrated that Palestinian lives matter. But more needs to be done to ensure that UNWRA can continue with its mandate to aid Palestinians who are suffering. To demonstrate our unwavering support to UNWRA, Malaysia is pleased to announce an additional contribution of $1 million. This will bring our total contribution to the agency to $5.2 million since November last year. We have also committed to an annual contribution to UNWRA of $200,000 from 2021 to 2025. Mr. President, in addition to contributions to UNWRA, Malaysia will continue to channel humanitarian assistance to Palestine by other means. Through the Humanitarian Trust Fund for the people of Palestine, Malaysia has contributed to various humanitarian initiatives, including medical aid, food assistance, improved sanitation and water hygiene management, clean water supply, and upgrading medical facilities for the Palestinians. Mr. President, Malaysia has been unequivocal in its support towards the establishment of a sovereign state of Palestine based on pre-1967 borders, with East Jerusalem at its capital. UNWRA must not be allowed to fall victim to narrow political interests, for the consequences of the agency's demise are unimaginable. I thank you.
I thank the distinguished representative of Malaysia. I now give the floor to the distinguished representative of Qatar.
تبرعات هذا العام في ظروف استثنائية تضاف إلى أزمة النقص المزمن في التمويل الذي تواجهه وكالة غوث وتشغيل اللاجئين الفلسطينيين في شغل الأنروا. الكارثة الإنسانية غير المسبوقة التي خلفتها الحرب الإسرائيلية المستمرة بقطاع غزة تتطلب قدرا هائلا من العمل الإنساني للاستجابة لها. وفي هذا الخصوص تقوم الوكالة بدور محوري ولا غنى عنه، وتمثل العمود الفقري للمساعدات الإنسانية في القطاع. إننا نثني على الجهود
We commend the great efforts that are exerted by the UNWRA staff, at the forefront of which is Mr. Lazarini's work, and we salute the great sacrifices they offer, and we welcome the independent review mechanism's report that showed the falseness of the allegations against the staff. We thank the countries that resumed and increased their contributions to the agency. Mr. Chair, Qatar announces that in May of this year, it offered $25 billion US, and this is an additional form of funding to support the main resources of UNWRA in 2024. And this contribution comes added to the $18 million US that Qatar offered and sent to UNWRA in December 2023 to support its core finances and core resources. Qatar will continue to coordinate with the Commissioner General of UNWRA at all levels in the current stage to guarantee the continuation of efforts to alleviate the suffering of the Palestinian people. And this comes added to all the different forms of humanitarian, financial, and in-kind support that the State of Qatar is offering to the Palestinian people in line with our principled policy of solidarity with them. I thank you.
I should like to thank the distinguished representative of Qatar. I now give the floor to the distinguished representative of Malta.
I thank you for convening this important pledging conference at such a critical period for UNWRA. I also thank the Secretary General, the PGA, and Commissioner General Lazzarini for their pertinent remarks. Presently, millions of Palestinians across the occupied Palestinian territory, Lebanon, Syria, and Jordan are facing unprecedented challenges. Rising regional escalations and the raging conflict in Gaza has left UNWRA facing a daily struggle to provide the services which ensure basic levels of humanity for millions of Palestinians. Malta strongly reaffirms that UNWRA is indispensable. The agency is a lifeline for Palestinians, a stabilizing force in the region, and the backbone for the humanitarian efforts in Gaza. Since 7th October, close to 200 UNWRA colleagues have been killed in Gaza, while over 180 UNWRA facilities upon which Gazan civilians depend for survival have been damaged or destroyed. This week alone, 4 schools have been struck, one of which was an UNWRA school sheltering displaced persons. Meanwhile, in the West Bank, the agency faces violence and the imposition of arbitrary measures that severely hamper its work. We underline that humanitarian personnel cannot be targeted and that full, transparent investigations into such instances is critical. Malta welcomes the UN's swift response in the wake of serious allegations that several UNWRA personnel participated in the heinous 7th October Hamas attacks against Israel. We take note that the Office of Internal Oversight Services remains engaged in investigations on the allegations. We are encouraged to note that the inquiry into the agency's neutrality, led by former French Foreign Minister Catherine Colonna, determined that it has in place significant mechanisms to ensure compliance and respond to neutrality breaches. We welcome the agency's commitment to implementing the recommendations put forward by the report. It is important to ensure that any gaps in compliance are bridged. This needs to be accompanied by the financial and political support necessary from influential donors and member states. For 75 years, UNWRA has spearheaded Palestinian refugees' health, education, and development needs. Malta particularly commends the agency's mission to ensure that Palestinian children have the education opportunities they deserve. We are deeply concerned that it is consistently lacking the necessary resources to deliver on this crucial mandate. Malta has been a regular contributor to UNWRA, and in keeping with this, we are pleased to announce an additional contribution during today's conference. We stress the necessity of a funding model which ensures predictable and sustained funding for the agency. The importance of political support for the agency also cannot be understated. Attacks against its mandates not only jeopardize its ability to address critical challenges, but also undermine the multilateral system. Malta has consistently called for an urgent return to a political horizon in line with the two-state solution as the main path towards peace in the Middle East. An immediate and permanent ceasefire in Gaza and the release of all remaining hostages are paramount to this end. In the absence of a comprehensive political solution to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, UNWRA remains a key pillar for Palestinians. It demands the international community's consistent financial and political support. Malta remains steadfastly committed to supporting UNRWA's vital role as the primary lifeline for millions of Palestinians. I thank you.
I thank the distinguished representative of Malta. I now give the floor to the distinguished representative of the Maldives.
Mr. President, I thank you for convening the UNWRA Pledging Conference during this critical time. I also wish to thank Secretary General Guterres and UNWRA's Commissioner General Lazzarini for the briefings and urgent call to action. UNWRA remains the only refuge for the millions of Palestinian refugees who are forced to leave their homes and their homeland. Today, in Gaza, the humanitarian situation is particularly dire, and over 1 million Palestinian refugees rely on UNWRA for food assistance. The government of Maldives is pledging to increase its annual contribution to UNWRA from $5,000 to $50,000. That is a tenfold increase. Last month, under the direction of President Dr. Moise, a telethon in solidarity with the people of Palestine was organized in the Maldives. The support and donations from the general public raised more than $1 million for UNWRA. It comprised $49,800 and more than 18.4 million Maldivian rupiah. I therefore have the honor to pledge at this conference that the Maldives' total contribution to UNWRA for the year 2024 is over $1.2 million. The Maldives recognizes the dire crisis facing UNWRA and reaffirms its commitment to help Palestine rebuild and recover from the trauma that its people are subjected to. UNWRA has been providing crucial services and emergency assistance to Palestinians for over 75 years. The past 9 months have witnessed one of the most challenging times for UNWRA. Israel has blatantly and brutally violated international humanitarian law. Since October last year, it conducted 453 attacks on UNWRA premises and killed 524 people who are sheltering in UNWRA facilities. The General Assembly mandated UNWRA in 1949 to assist and protect Palestinian refugees. The UN member states must provide financial and political support to ensure the agency's essential mandate continues. UNWRA remains more relevant today than it has ever been. The continued functioning of UNWRA will remain necessary and fundamental until all refugees are returned, resettled, reintegrated, and the original mandate of UNWRA is fulfilled. The Maldives once again reiterates its call for self-determination, justice, and a lasting peace for people of Palestine, with the establishment of an independent and sovereign state of Palestine based on the pre-1967 borders with East Jerusalem as its capital. I thank you.
I thank the distinguished representative of the Maldives. I now give the floor to the distinguished representative of Algeria.
Mr. President, at the outset, I would like to thank you for organizing this timely meeting. It comes at a crucial moment when the Palestinian people face the brutal onslaught of the Israeli occupying power. This meeting is a new opportunity to renew our commitment toward UNWRA and toward the Palestinian refugees. For this reason, Algeria was in the core group of the initiative launched by Jordan, Kuwait, and Slovenia on the shared commitment of UNWRA. Mr. Lazzarini, we highly appreciate your effort and dedication to help the Palestinian refugees despite the challenges you are facing every day. Please accept our sincere condolence on all your colleagues that have been killed by the Israeli occupation forces. Mr. President, in this context of humanitarian catastrophe and widespread risk of famine in Gaza, the role of humanitarian actors is crucial. As the backbone of humanitarian actions in Gaza, UNRWA is irreplaceable. Unfortunately, instead of being empowered, it is under relentless attack from the Israeli occupying power. The objective is clear: dismantling UNRWA to eliminate the refugee issue. In this regard, I would like to highlight the following 3 points. First, UNRWA's mandate is derived from General Assembly resolution and represent the will of the international community. In this context, we condemn all the attempts by the occupying authority of Israel to declare UNRWA a terrorist organization. Such a plan, if implemented, would have a devastating impact on the whole UN system. Second, no one can replace UNRWA. Neither UN agencies nor NGOs can fulfill UNRWA's role on the ground. UNRWA, I repeat, should be empowered to take care of Palestinian refugees wherever they are. Third, UNRWA's chronic financial deficit must be addressed in a sustainable manner. My country, Algeria, upon the decision of President Abdelmajid Tebboune, has very recently allocated $15 million to UNRWA in response to the SG calls to allow UNRWA to continue operating. This aim to help the agency overcome shortages following some donors' decision to freeze or to suspend their contributions. Such a situation should prompt us to think about a more stable and sustainable financial model for UNWRA. To conclude, Mr. President, we reaffirm, Algeria reaffirm its unwavering support for UNWRA and call upon all partners to continue supporting it to fulfill its mandate now and in the future. I thank you.
I should like to thank the distinguished representative of Algeria. I now give the floor to the distinguished representative of Japan.
Thank you, Mr. President. Let me extend my heartfelt appreciation to the Secretary General, Mr. Guterres, the President of General Assembly, Mr. Denis Francis, and UNWRA Commissioner General, Mr. Filippo Lazzarini, for their powerful and moving statements. This year marks the 75th anniversary of UNWRA. The current situation is not, unfortunately, what those who established the agency envisaged 75 years ago. The plight of Palestine refugees is nowhere near its end and has only been intensifying since October last year. Far too many innocent Palestinians have been killed, injured, and plagued by the devastating conflict in the Gaza Strip and the heightened violence in the West Bank. At the same time, UNWRA is experiencing the most difficult moment in its history. We would like to express our sincere condolences to the loved ones and colleagues of the more than 190 brave UNWRA workers who lost their lives serving the agency. The need for an immediate, full, and complete ceasefire and the release of all remaining hostages in accordance with the UN Security Council Resolution 2735 cannot be more emphasized. Mr. President, today I wish to deliver 4 key messages from the government of Japan, a long-standing partner of UNWRA since 1953, even before we became a member of the UN. First, Japan strongly supports the work of UNWRA in providing critical life-saving assistance to Palestinians in Gaza who are suffering from shortages of bare minimum goods essential for human life, such as safe water, food, shelter, and medicine. UNWRA plays an indispensable role to preserve the human dignity of Palestinians. Any actions that disrupt its activities are unacceptable. UNWRA aid workers and premises should never be targeted. We are deeply disturbed by the series of attacks on UNRWA's schools over the past few days, which reportedly killed dozens of people who were taking refuge there. Second, Japan highly values the various UN-led initiatives to address the serious allegations that UNRWA staff members participated in the brutal terror attack against Israel by Hamas and other militant groups. We welcome and strongly support the commitment by Mr. Lazzarini to fully implement the recommendations contained in the report of the Independent Review Group led by Madame Colonna. For our part, we will contribute to the development and implementation of training program for area staff managers to foster accountability and compliance with the principles of integrity and neutrality. We will also contribute to the effective management practices through the lens of women, peace, and security. Japan looks forward to seeing concrete outcomes in UNRWA's reforms. Third, Japan underscores the utmost importance of UNRWA in the early recovery and reconstruction of Gaza. In particular, we agree with UNRWA's focus on the education of children who are the next generation in Gaza, including treatment for the mental trauma inflicted on them by this conflict. Necessary preparations for the reconstruction should be scaled up even before a sustainable ceasefire is achieved, and the Palestinian Authority should play a critical role to this end. Fourthly, Japan is profoundly alarmed by UNRWA's severe funding shortage, which poses a great risk of the agency closing down after August. We have already contributed approximately $35 million to UNRWA this year, and we will spare no efforts to save the agency's vital operations as we have done over the past 7 decades as a major donor. We call on the international community to urgently provide further financial support to UNRWA. In conclusion, Mr. President, we need a strong UNRWA more than ever, and we have a collective responsibility to empower the agency to navigate this time of unprecedented crisis. I thank you, Mr. President.
I should like to thank the distinguished representative of Japan. I now give the floor to the distinguished representative of France.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Mr.
Je voudrais d'abord exprimer la reconnaissance de la France au commissaire général de l'UNWRA, M. Lazzarini, et à l'ensemble de son personnel pour leur engagement et leur travail exceptionnel dans des conditions difficiles. La France rend hommage à tous les personnels humanitaires de l'UNWRA, de l'ONU et des ONG qui ont été tués à Gaza. La France réitère son soutien à l'UNRWA. Dans la bande de Gaza, l'UNRWA est incontournable pour apporter une aide humanitaire indispensable à la population civile palestinienne dont les besoins sont immenses. En 2024, la France a soutenu l'action humanitaire de l'UNRWA à hauteur de 33 millions d'euros. J'annonce aujourd'hui une contribution additionnelle de 5 millions d'euros à l'UNRWA pour ses projets d'assistance alimentaire d'urgence en faveur des populations palestiniennes au Liban et en Syrie, ce qui porte le soutien total de la France à l'UNRWA à 38 millions d'euros en 2024. Nous appelons tous les États à contribuer au financement de l'UNRWA. La France salue le lancement par l'UNRWA de son plan d'action de haut niveau, qui veille à mettre en œuvre les recommandations de l'audit externe indépendant conduit par Mme Colonna. Il est essentiel de s'assurer sans plus de délai que l'Office respecte pleinement les principes des Nations Unies et les principes humanitaires d'indépendance, de neutralité et d'impartialité. C'est dans cet esprit que la France a rejoint l'initiative lancée par la Slovénie, la Jordanie et le Koweït. La France réitère son appel à ce que soit garanti un accès et un acheminement humanitaire complet, massif et sans entrave pour répondre aux besoins immenses de la population civile de Gaza. Face à l'urgence humanitaire absolue, au risque de famine et conformément aux ordonnances de la Cour internationale de justice, Israël doit tout mettre en œuvre pour garantir l'accès de l'aide humanitaire et donc garantir le passage par les voies terrestres qui sont les plus efficaces. La France continuera d'œuvrer en faveur d'un cessez-le-feu immédiat et durable pour mettre fin aux souffrances de la population civile de Gaza. Elle appelle à la libération immédiate de tous les otages et réitère sa condamnation des attaques terroristes du 7 octobre. Elle rappelle l'urgence d'œuvrer à un règlement politique du conflit israélo-palestinien sur la base de la solution des deux États et à une solution juste, équitable et durable pour les réfugiés palestiniens dans le cadre d'un accord de paix.
For the Palestinian refugees in the context of a peace agreement. Thank you.
I should like to thank the distinguished representative of France. I now give the floor to the distinguished representative of the Philippines.
Mr. President, Commissioner General, Excellencies, the Philippines reiterates its support to the United Nations Relief and Works Agency for Palestine Refugees in the Near East, UNWRA, in providing critical services and support to the Palestinian people, even in extraordinary circumstances and during times of conflict. We also laud UNWRA for accepting the Colonna report and its plan to establish an action plan to implement the recommendations contained in the final report. We note the complexity of UNRWA's work and we are confident that implementing the recommended measures of the Colonna report would enhance its effectiveness and efficiency. We are confident that this pledging conference will serve as a bridge to UNWRA's long-term recovery, stabilization planning, and programming activities. In this regard, and in firm solidarity with the Palestinian people and in support of the work of UNWRA, I am pleased to inform that the Philippines has already remitted our voluntary financial contribution for the 2024 program budget of UNWRA, amounting to US $100,000. This doubles our previous Philippine commitment to UNWRA's budget. Thank you, Excellencies.
I thank the
fournir une aide et une assistance humanitaire à Gaza. À l'approche du 75e anniversaire de sa fondation en 1989, l'Andorra réaffirme son soutien au rôle irréplaçable de l'Office qui offre l'assistance aux civils en détresse en leur donnant accès à la nourriture, aux soins de la santé et à l'eau. Mais c'est aussi une lueur d'espoir en dispensant une éducation aux enfants et aux jeunes qui sont l'avenir de la région. Depuis octobre 2023, 197 membres du personnel de l'UNWRA ont été tués et 453 attaques contre les locaux ont été signalées. En outre, 2 tiers des écoles gérées par l'agence à Gaza ont été touchées. La dernière il y a seulement 3 jours. Le personnel humanitaire, les abris, les hôpitaux, les écoles ne doivent jamais être pris pour cible. Mettre fin à ces attaques est une obligation en vertu du droit humanitaire international, ainsi qu'un impératif moral. Nous souhaitons exprimer notre solidarité et nos condoléances avec les victimes et les familles. L'Andorra appelle la communauté internationale et les parties impliquées dans les conflits à mettre fin aux souffrances de la population civile, en particulier des groupes les plus vulnérables. Nous appelons à cesser le feu et à la libération des otages, une fois de plus, au respect des droits de l'homme. Monsieur le Président, Andorra recognizes the urgent need to continue its financial support to UNWRA and has contributed in 2023 and 2024 until now to the agency 60,000 euros. This is a modest amount, but very sincere. We join also the declaration initiated by Jordan, Kuwait, and Slovenia that was launched today. We also praise the report of the Independent Review Group led by the former French Foreign Minister, Catherine Colonna, and welcome UNRWA's implementation of its recommendations. Indeed, in times of conflict, information becomes an easy target too, and we advocate in favor of UNRWA's neutrality principle. To conclude, Andorra reaffirms its unwavering support to UNRWA and its personnel and the crucial work to mitigate the suffering of people in need in Palestine and elsewhere in the region. Thank you very much.
I should like to thank the distinguished representative of Andorra. I now give the floor to the distinguished representative of Indonesia.
Thank you, Mr. President. Let me begin by expressing our deep condolences to the families of over 190 UNRWA staff killed in Gaza. I thank the Commissioner General for his briefing today. As a lifeline for millions of Palestinian refugees, we must protect and reinforce UNRWA. But today, UNRWA is on life support. UNRWA is also fighting attempts to decapitate its role, making it helpless to effectively help the Palestinian refugees. In this regard, I wish to convey 2 messages. First, Indonesia, if we truly stand for humanity, we must stand with UNRWA. For the Indonesian people, the wounds of the Palestinian people are our wounds. For this reason, in 2023, Indonesia has tripled our annual voluntary contribution. We have also front-loaded our 2024 contribution while others suspended theirs. Today, I am announcing a doubling of our annual voluntary contribution beginning 2024. This will make our annual contribution to 1.2 million, a 600% increase from January 2023. In addition, Indonesia will also provide a grant of $2 million to the UNRWA flash appeal. Mr. President, Indonesia's support to Palestine is a collective solidarity. From November 2023 to April 2024, the government and the people of Indonesia have sent 3,594 tons of assistance worth over $11 million. Since November 2023, the Indonesian Zakat Fund, Basnas, has distributed around $3.3 million to Palestine. Going forward, we will continue to develop innovative sources and diversify funding stream to help UNWRA, including through partnership with the Indonesian Zakat Fund. Second, supporting UNWRA is not an act of solidarity. It is a fundamental investment to humanity and in regional peace and stability. Therefore, we must advocate for UNWRA's mandate, reinforce its role, and reject any efforts to legitimize the agency. Last month, I painfully remarked it at the Council that the children who died in Gaza may be the fortunate ones, and those who survive are surviving in a hellish condition. Given the Security Council's inability to stop wars, the least we must do is to support UNWRA, ensuring it's adequately funded and empowered. To conclude, let me reiterate that UNWRA is an integral part of a just and lasting solution in Palestine. Until there is a solution for the Palestinian refugees, UNWRA must have our unwavering support. Thank you, Mr. President.
I should like to thank the distinguished representative of Indonesia. I now give the floor to the distinguished representative of Italy.
I thank the Secretary General, the President of the General Assembly, and the Commissioner General of UNWRA, Lazzarini, for their remarks. The significance of this meeting today cannot be stressed enough. It is of vital importance that assistance and relief are immediately delivered and made available without any impediment to civilians that are bearing the brunt of a conflict in which they have no part. There is not a single person in Gaza that has not been impacted by the destructive violence that ensued the terrorist attacks carried out by Hamas on October the 7th, causing immense suffering and civilian victims, particularly among innocent Palestinian women and children. At the same time, we have all along categorically condemned Hamas attacks and hostage-taking. We call for the immediate release of all hostages for the respect of international humanitarian law by all parties, and for unimpeded and continuous access to aid delivery throughout the Gaza Strip in line with the Security Council Resolution 2735. Mr. President, impeding and delaying aid will only lead to more suffering, and as we have seen countless times before, suffering leads to anger, anger leads to hate, and hate leads to further extremism. We need to prevent this cycle of violence, as it would further hamper the prospect of a durable peace that can only be achieved through a political agreement based on a two-state solution. UNWRA and other UN agencies need to be allowed to deliver on their mandate in total safety for their staff. Their role is crucial, their work is essential. For this reason, Italy will support UNWRA with 5 million euros, of which 2 million will be allocated to the flash appeal for projects in the West Bank. Italy strongly reaffirms neutrality as the overriding principle of humanitarian aid. In this vein, we believe it is of utmost importance that the recommendations in the Colonna report will be fully implemented. Italy's commitment to bringing humanitarian relief to Gaza remains steadfast, as evidenced by our total contribution of 55 million euros, mainly devoted to health and food security sectors. In this spirit, our Ministry of Foreign Affairs launched the Food for Gaza initiative last March. These are concrete signs of the Italian government's strong commitment to alleviating the suffering of the Palestinian population. I thank you.
I should like to thank the distinguished representative of Italy. I now give the floor to the distinguished representative of Luxembourg.
Monsieur le Président, Monsieur le Commissaire général, cette conférence se tient alors qu'il n'y a plus de mots pour décrire la gravité de la situation dans la bande de Gaza. Le Luxembourg déplore les pertes massives de vies humaines et condamne toutes les violations du droit international humanitaire qui privent les civils et les acteurs humanitaires de la protection à laquelle ils ont droit. Nous saluons le courage et l'engagement extraordinaire dont fait preuve le personnel de l'UNWRA sous le leadership du commissaire général Philippe Lazzarini afin de fournir des services essentiels et une protection aux réfugiés de Palestine dans la région et en particulier dans la bande de Gaza. Nous présentons nos plus sincères condoléances aux familles et aux collègues de ceux qui ont perdu la vie depuis le 7 octobre. Nous réitérons ici notre appel à un cessez-le-feu immédiat et à la libération de tous les otages, à la pleine mise en œuvre des résolutions du Conseil de sécurité et de l'Assemblée générale, ainsi que des mesures conservatoires indiquées à Israël par la Cour internationale de justice.
Interim measures on Israel from the ICJ. UNWRA is the very backbone of humanitarian aid in Gaza. Its work with the Palestinian people for 75 years now makes it crucial and irreplaceable. The role of the agency in all countries in the region who host Palestinian refugees and its role in maintaining stability there is undoubted. We would urge all member states to preserve the vital work of UNWRA. We are very concerned by the numerous number of legal and logistical obstacles that UNWRA is confronted with in the West Bank and East Jerusalem. Now, we would reaffirm our commitment to UNWRA in terms of the Madame Colonna report. There needs to be impartiality. Given the increasing needs of the Palestinian refugees, particularly in the area of education and basic needs of their UNWRA needs predictable financing. I am delighted to say that Luxembourg has decided to provide €1 million extra, and that is flexible financing for UNWRA, and that is in addition to the €2.1 million. So soon, our support will be €5.2 million for 2024. By the end of the year, Luxembourg intends to renew its strategic partnership with UNWRA for the next 3 years. We also support the digitalization project of the archives that will help to preserve the identity and background of Palestinian refugees. Luxembourg is committed to remaining a reliable partner for UNWRA financially and also politically speaking. Along with more than 100 countries, we joined with the Declaration of Commitment initiated by Kuwait, Jordan, and Slovenia. We will continue to support UNWRA and Palestinian refugees until a just political solution be found to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict as part of a two-state solution. Thank you very much.
I thank the distinguished representative of Luxembourg, and I now give the floor to the distinguished representative of Australia.
Mr. President, UNWRA does life-saving work. This is why successive Australian governments have funded it since 1951. UNWRA is the only organisation with the capacity to deliver aid on the scale needed to address the catastrophic humanitarian situation in Gaza. Around 90% of Gazans are displaced. Almost the entire population of 2.3 million is facing acute food insecurity. UNWRA's ability to operate is crucial in the current crisis. In delivering on its mandate, UNWRA must ensure its integrity and neutrality are beyond reproach. Australia welcomed the decisive actions by UNWRA and UN Secretary-General Guterres earlier this year to put in place additional safeguards, strengthen the integrity of operations and develop an action plan. That is why Australia resumed funding to UNWRA in March, and it is why we will continue our funding of $20 million this year. Australia welcomed the findings of the Colonna Review into UNWRA and was pleased the UN Secretary-General accepted the recommendations and that UNWRA has committed to implement them all. Going forward, UNWRA must continue to ensure the highest standards of governance and accountability are met. It must conduct a prompt and thorough investigation when any credible allegation is raised and ensure anyone responsible is held to account. Australia will work with UNWRA to maintain an ongoing focus on diligence and vigilance in its operations. We have expressed this shared commitment along with over 80 other donors earlier today. We urge Israel to recognise UNWRA's mandate, work constructively to ensure its integrity and facilitate its life-saving work. We express our sincerest condolences for the 193 UNWRA staff and more than 80 other aid workers killed in this conflict. The death of any aid worker is unacceptable. Australia has continually advocated for adherence to international humanitarian law and the protection of aid workers. Civilians must be protected, aid must flow at scale, and hostages must be released. The humanitarian catastrophe we are witnessing in Gaza cannot continue. Australia's guiding principle has always been the pursuit of a just and enduring peace in the form of a two-state solution. UNWRA's work remains vital as the international community strives for a just and enduring peace in the region. Thank you.
I thank the distinguished representative of Australia. I now give the floor to the distinguished representative of Liechtenstein.
Thank you, Chair. We join many friends and partners today in acknowledging UNWRA's indispensable assistance to Palestinian refugees across the Middle East region, and especially the lifeline it provides to civilians in Gaza today. UNWRA's delivery of essential humanitarian goods and services, as well as its operations in areas such as healthcare and education, make a significant contribution to the stability of the region at all times. At times like this, its work is and will continue to be more necessary than ever. We pay tribute to the 197 UNWRA employees who have lost their lives while trying to save the lives of others and alleviate their suffering in the most extreme of circumstances. We reiterate our full condemnation of any attacks on humanitarian personnel. Our support for UNWRA services in the occupied Palestinian territories and neighboring countries is an important element of Liechtenstein's humanitarian and development assistance to the Middle East region. I'm therefore pleased to announce that Liechtenstein will maintain its support for UNWRA in 2024 in the amount of 100,000 Swiss francs to support its work in the Gaza Strip and West Bank. We hope that this financial contribution will assist UNWRA in carrying out its work to full capacity. UNWRA's efforts must live up to the highest standards of transparency and accountability, should not be politicized, and should receive the full support of the international community. In light of these responsibilities, Liechtenstein is deeply concerned by the allegations of the involvement of 12 UNWRA employees in the 7 October terrorist attacks by Hamas. We welcome the Colonna report, which has provided a thorough and comprehensive analysis of UNWRA's mechanisms and procedures, as well as a clear basis on which UNWRA can take steps necessary to address governance issues. We have been encouraged by UNWRA's quick and positive response and look forward to being part of the conversation on implementation. We will also closely follow the ongoing investigation by the UN Office of Internal Oversight Services and look forward to their findings. In respect of the above, we have joined 117 other states today in endorsing the statement of shared commitments on UNWRA, which we believe sets out a clear basis for an enhanced relationship between the agency and member states. On a personal note, Mr. Chair, I wish to express my pleasure to see you chairing this meeting and to thank you for your personal and professional friendship and wish you all the best for your future.
I should like to thank the distinguished representative of Liechtenstein also for his comments directed to myself. I now give the floor to the distinguished representative of Germany.
Thank you, Chair, and also Excellencies, colleagues, Commissioner General. Let me first start by expressing Germany's appreciation for the work carried out by UNWRA and its staff, and express, like other speakers before me, my deepest condolences and respect and appreciation for those and their families who lost their lives in this service. Germany has been a steadfast supporter of UNWRA's important work for Palestinian refugees in all country contexts: Lebanon, Syria, the occupied Palestinian territories, Jordan. Underlining our support, in March, the German Ministry for Economic Development and Cooperation and the German Federal Foreign Office announced new funding of 45 million euros for UNWRA in Lebanon, Jordan, Syria, and the West Bank. Additionally, that is 2 weeks ago, Foreign Minister Baerbock announced 10 million euros in new funding for UNWRA during her recent visit to the occupied Palestinian territories. In addition, she announced 14 million euros for WFP and NGOs for their life-saving work in Gaza. In Beirut, Foreign Minister Baerbock announced 18 million euros in humanitarian assistance for IDPs, Syrian refugees, and their Lebanese host communities. This adds to Germany's significant humanitarian diplomatic efforts and humanitarian assistance to help alleviate the tremendous suffering in Gaza. Our humanitarian aid now stands at 313 million euros since 2023, and we are committed to continue our efforts. During Foreign Minister Baerbock's 10 visits to the region since 7th of October 23, she repeatedly called for humanitarian assistance to be scaled up and distributed to the civilian population in Gaza immediately and without any obstructions. We reiterate the urgency of full, rapid, safe, and unhindered access to humanitarian assistance at scale for Palestinians in need, and of allowing and facilitating humanitarian workers and international organizations to operate effectively inside Gaza. A sustainable deconfliction system is of crucial importance. UNWRA and other UN organizations must be enabled to completely fulfill their mandates. UNWRA plays a vital role in meeting the basic needs of the people in Gaza. UNWRA remains an important partner for other international organizations that rely on UNWRA's operative structures. In a context of enormous challenges, Germany remains supportive of UNWRA's work, and we very much welcome that UNWRA is fully committed to implementing the recommendations of the Colonel Report and urge UNWRA to continue its efforts in this regard. These reforms and their thorough implementation at all ranks and in all fields of operation are necessary to provide a stable, sustainable basis for UNWRA's role and execution of the mandate and the future. Neutrality is key in all fields of operations, and we expect further improvements. This is why we take also the new allegations concerning the neutrality of UNWRA staff brought forward by Israel this week very seriously, and we trust and we expect, of course, that UNWRA takes all necessary measures for a thorough investigation to make sure that there is no place for extremism, hatred, terrorism in the organization. We are looking forward to seeing continued progress in the implementation of the high-level action plan and to continuing the constructive dialogue we are having with UNWRA's leadership. Continued dialogue will be very important, as there are many challenges ahead. We especially call on non-traditional donors to provide financial support. We also welcome that UNWRA announced to build on and extend partnerships with other UN agencies and partners in the region in order to keep delivering on its mandate. We encourage UNWRA to intensify those efforts. UNWRA's mandate is closely linked to the prospect of a true political perspective. Germany firmly believes in two states, Israel and Palestine, for two peoples in the Middle East, and we fully support Palestinians' right to self-determination. Every child, every family deserves to live in peace, prosperity, and in dignity. That is why Germany has been working towards a two-state solution for years, and we will relentlessly continue to do so. I thank you.
I should like to thank the distinguished representative of Germany, and I now give the floor to the distinguished representative of Denmark.
Commissioner General, colleagues, at a time of immense civilian suffering, enormous loss of life, and a majority of Gaza's population facing high levels of acute food insecurity, UNWRA has continued to play an indispensable role since Hamas' deplorable terrorist attack on 7 October. Denmark deplores the high number of humanitarian workers who have been killed during this crisis. We convey our deepest condolences to the UNWRA staff who have been killed while saving the life of others. Their memory and invaluable work must not be forgotten and should be restated here today, where we renew our commitment to UNWRA. And once again, we call on all parties to protect humanitarian workers, civilians, as well as civilian infrastructure, in accordance with civil international law, including international humanitarian law. Recognizing that UNWRA remains the main lifeline for almost 2 million civilians in Gaza, Denmark has continued its annual core funding of $15 million and made additional contributions in 2023 of approximately $10 million to UNWRA. 2 weeks ago, Denmark again announced an additional humanitarian package to Gaza, including a contribution of around $4.3 million to UNWRA. In addition to being the backbone of the humanitarian response in Gaza, UNWRA plays a crucial and stabilizing role in the West Bank and the wider region. The current financial situation of UNWRA is critical and unsustainable. There is a need for more predictable and flexible funding to ensure a robust and efficient UNWRA. We hope this pledging conference today will be a step towards that aim. It is equally important that all restrictions on UNWRA's ability to perform its critical functions in line with its mandate are lifted. Denmark, along the lines with the EU, reiterates the urgent call for an immediate ceasefire, release of all hostages, and the full, safe, and unhindered provision of aid into Gaza. At the same time, Denmark continues its unwavering commitment to a lasting peace on the basis of a two-state solution. On a final note, and following the allegations directed towards UNWRA earlier this year, Denmark welcomed the prompt response by the Secretary-General, as well as the Commissioner-General of UNWRA. We have also expressed our support for the Commissioner-General's commitment to implement the recommendations by the Independent Review Group, and we have extended our support to the implementation process. It is critically important that UNWRA comes out of the past months as a strengthened and modernized agency and is able to restore trust in the organization. Denmark would do whatever is within our abilities to assist this transformation. I thank you.
I should like to thank the distinguished representative of Denmark. I now give the floor to the distinguished representative of Spain.
Gracias, queridos colegas. Esta edición de la Conferencia Anual de Donantes de UNWRA se celebra en circunstancias excepcionales, imposibles de prever a principios de junio del pasado año. Desde el inicio de esta crisis, España ha insistido en que solo un alto al fuego inmediato y permanente puede aliviar el sufrimiento de la población civil en Gaza y sus necesidades humanitarias, permitir el acceso masivo, rápido, seguro y sin obstáculos de ayuda humanitaria y la liberación segura de todos los rehenes que aún se encuentran cautivos en manos de Hamas. El comisionado general, Philippe Lazzarini, ha sido rotundo en la gravedad de la situación financiera de la agencia y la magnitud de los desafíos a los que se enfrenta. En el contexto actual, el desastre humanitario, UNWRA ha demostrado repetidamente que es la columna vertebral de la asistencia humanitaria multilateral en Gaza. Más que nunca, UNWRA es ahora irreemplazable. Sin embargo, está pagando un precio terrible con casi 200 miembros de su personal asesinados desde el pasado 7 de octubre. El fin de semana pasado, el ataque a una escuela de UNWRA en Usharait causó más de una docena de víctimas y muchos más heridos. El derecho internacional humanitario no se está respetando. Reclamamos una vez más el deber de estar y de respetar el derecho internacional humanitario por todas las partes. Recordamos asimismo que el cumplimiento de las medidas provisionales de la Corte Internacional de Justicia no es opcional y exigimos una vez más su inmediato cumplimiento. La población civil de Gaza está pagando injustamente por los crímenes de Hamas. No es aceptable. Por eso España abogó por una rápida conclusión de la revisión de todo el proceso de asignación de la ayuda humanitaria de la Unión Europea y también aumentó su apoyo financiero a UNRWA en el momento en que otros países la suspendían, tras las alegaciones de connivencia con Hamas. Ninguna de las investigaciones ha dado crédito ni encontrado pruebas que las respalden. Saludamos los esfuerzos de la agencia para implementar las recomendaciones del grupo de revisión independiente para reforzar sus mecanismos de supervisión interna. Desde el 7 de octubre, España ha aumentado en 43 millones de euros UNRWA, 23,5 millones de euros solo este año. Animamos a otros donantes y socios a aumentar sus aportaciones. Quiero destacar también el apoyo solidario con UNRWA y la población refugiada palestina de la sociedad civil española a través del trabajo del Comité Español de UNRWA y de la cooperación descentralizada de comunidades autónomas y municipios. Nuestro compromiso con UNRWA va más allá del anuncio de cifras. España presidirá el Comité Asesor de UNRWA hasta junio de 2025. Esperamos que Naciones Unidas también respalde formalmente esta idea de la celebración inmediata de una cumbre que pueda albergar un debate sosegado y profundo en materia de abordar la terrible situación que vive Gaza. Esperamos, asimismo, que la próxima Semana Ministerial de la Asamblea General de Naciones Unidas genere el impulso necesario para la implementación de la solución de los dos estados. Muchas gracias.
I thank the distinguished representative of Spain. I now give the floor to the distinguished representative of Norway.
Thank you, President, and thank you for convening us. Over the last year, UNRWA personnel and facilities have been under constant attack. The repeated violations of international law are unacceptable. Almost 200 UNRWA staff have been killed in Gaza since October last year. Our thoughts are with their colleagues and their affected families. We reiterate our call for an immediate ceasefire, and we reiterate other core messages. The hostages must be released. The parties to the conflict have an obligation to ensure safe, rapid, and unhindered humanitarian access. Civilians must be protected. The fighting must end now. We strongly reject unilateral actions by any party, including Israel, aimed at undermining the work of the United Nations. If UNRWA is prevented from implementing its mandate, it will have ramifications way beyond the Middle East and could potentially threaten the UN's work wherever it operates. We commend UNRWA's ability to provide basic services and humanitarian assistance under extreme circumstances. Ensuring that UNRWA can continue to deliver on its mandate is our shared responsibility. We must prioritize predictable and sufficient financial support to UNRWA, thus enabling the agency to focus on its critical work. That is why we today are pleased to announce an additional contribution. We will increase our contribution to UNRWA by 100 million Norwegian kroner, which is approximately $10 million, raising our total contribution to UNRWA for this year to 475 million Norwegian kroner, approximately $47 million. We strongly encourage other donors and potential donors to come forward with contributions. We welcome that most countries that suspended their funding earlier this year have resumed their contributions and hope the rest will follow. Norway has maintained our support throughout this period, firmly believing that we cannot collectively punish millions of refugees and an entire organization for the alleged conduct of a few. We also welcome the agency's action plan for implementing the Kelowna report's recommendations and stress the need to strike the right balance between implementation of the action plan and UNRWA's core mandated tasks in all its fields of operation. UNRWA is the backbone of the humanitarian response in Gaza. But UNRWA is so much more than a humanitarian agency. UNRWA is our joint commitment to securing the rights of Palestine refugees until a political solution can be found. And I thank you.
I should like to thank the distinguished representative of Norway I now give the floor to the distinguished representative of Iraq.
شكرا جزيلا السيد الرئيس. في البداية أود أن أعرب عن بالغ تقديرنا للجهود المبذولة من السيد رئيس الجمعية للمتابعة الحثيثة والمستمرة في رعاية هذه الاجتماعات وسط أجواء مروعة يعيشها الشعب الفلسطيني نتيجة استمرار حرب الإبادة الجماعية التي تشنها قوات الاحتلال الإسرائيلي ضده وتجرد من الإنسانية وتجاه المتعمد منها لكل قواعد القانون الدولي والقانون الدولي الإنساني رغم قرارات مجلس الأمن
Israel of all international humanitarian rules and all of the relevant resolutions. 2735 being the most recent. These reflect the desire of the international community to bring an end to the occupation. I would like to thank Philippe Lazzarini, the Commissioner General of UNWRA, for being here and for his comprehensive briefing. This reflected the devastating situation and the scale of the suffering, the inhuman suffering that the Palestinian people are experiencing because of the crimes and carnage carried out by the Israeli occupying forces. They've used all types of weapons against the Palestinian people. Mr. Lazzarini clarified the funding crisis that UNWRA is experiencing. This prevents it from implementing its mandate. Sir, Iraq would like to reiterate its support for UNWRA. UNWRA is continuing to uphold its mandate and its operational work. The importance of UNWRA's work is crucial. It must be able to be continued. Because of Israeli attacks, there have been many sacrifices within UNWRA, and the Iraqi government would like to express its sincere condolences to families of UNWRA victims, those people who were killed when they were carrying out their duty. By the same token, we commend the efforts made by UNWRA and its vital role in assisting millions of Palestinian people over the past 75 years. The scale of the task facing UNWRA is huge. UNWRA nonetheless is the largest UN program, and its efforts are very specific. They have a direct impact. They pursue various different aims, including the SDGs. UNWRA is not just a humanitarian agency. Rather, it is a form of salvation, so to speak, for the Palestinian people. It is the only organization, we believe, that has the ability and experience for many years now to shoulder humanitarian tasks and also development tasks on a large scale. So we are concerned by the unjust allegations in the media that wish to tarnish UNWRA's reputation. These allegations, which have not been backed up by evidence, and talking about just a few UNWRA staff members, and UNWRA has thousands of staff. This cannot justify a stoppage of funding, especially given the enormous suffering of the Palestinian people and the huge needs that they have. Iraq, in particular in Gaza, Iraq welcomes the fact that donor countries have continued to provide support to UNWRA, and we would urge those countries that have ceased funding to continue and to resume it. UNWRA has not fully been able to help the people it needs to, so we reject this tactic of trying to restrict UNWRA's work. We are going to make a contribution of $25 million to UNWRA to help it fund its work. The Iraqi Association of the Red Crescent is seeking to support UNWRA as well. We are also providing direct aid through the Iraqi Red Crescent. In conclusion, sir, we would reiterate Iraq's support for UNWRA, its efforts and its unfailing committed work. We commend the most recent visit of the Commissioner General, Mr. Lazzarini, to Iraq. We believe that UNWRA will remain the backbone of aid provided to Palestinian people and to supplying assistance to them, we reiterate our unchanged position as regards the rights of the Palestinian people and their legitimate aspirations to have an independent state with East Jerusalem as capital. Thank you.
I thank the distinguished representative of Iraq. I now give the floor to the distinguished representative of Oman.
I'm going to deliver this statement in English, unfortunately. Vice President, it's good to see you presiding over this important meeting. Commissioner General Lazzarini, ladies and gentlemen. We are here because of a default in the international system, which have promised in 1945 to save succeeding generations from the scourge of war. Let's not forget the fact that we're here today after 75 years because of the repeated and systematic violations of international law. It is as simple as this. My country, Oman, is a strong supporter of UNWRA, and I would like to reiterate Oman's commitment to continue supporting UNWRA and its noble mission. We agree with the Secretary General of the United Nations this morning when saying that we're here to protect UNWRA and UNWRA staff. We also share the view of the President of the General Assembly that not only UNWRA existence is at stake, but the sanctity of human life. It is not only about funding, it is about saving lives, precious lives. We call on member states to continue believing and supporting UNWRA. It is much needed now, more than ever, and it is very much indispensable. We categorically condemn, in the strongest terms, the attack and the killing of UNWRA staff. Our condolences, Mr. Lazzarini, for the 197 UNWRA staff who have been killed in the service of humanity, unreplaceable lives. And we call for the full and dignified recognition of those. It is a huge sacrifice that not only deserve the recognition of the international community, but holding those responsible accountable for their actions. It is time to end the 75 years of tragedy of the Palestinians. It is too much for the Palestinians to bear. UNWRA, supposedly a temporary mandate, remains pertinent and necessary until we see an end to the occupation. Through the realization of the two-state solution, Commissioner General, allow me to conclude by stating once again, my country is totally dedicated for the support of UNWRA, financially, politically, and logistically. Thank you very much.
I should like to thank the distinguished representative of Oman. I now give the floor to the distinguished representative of Canada.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and laissez-moi d'abord remercier le commissaire général pour sa présence et le rapport qu'il nous a donné. Et laissez-moi commencer en affirmant les positions fondamentales du Canada sur la situation au Moyen-Orient, autant que sur la situation et notre appui pour UNWRA. Nous condamnons sans équivoque le Hamas, une organisation terroriste inscrite sur la liste, pour ses attaques contre Israël le 7 octobre 2023. Nous soutenons l'accord global présenté par le président Biden qui conduirait à un cessez-le-feu immédiat à Gaza, à la libération de tous les otages, il ne faut pas les oublier, et une augmentation significative et durable de l'aide humanitaire. Même en l'absence d'un accord de cessez-le-feu, le droit humanitaire international doit être respecté à tout moment. Ceci est essentiel pour que l'aide vitale aux personnes dans le besoin puisse être acheminée rapidement, en toute sécurité et sans entrave. As we convene today, Mr. Chairman, UNWRA and Palestinian refugees are facing challenges on a scale we have not seen before in the region. Nothing in this conflict dating back to the mid-1940s and even before then, nothing in this conflict compares with the humanitarian and overall dire situation which so many people are facing, as well as the loss of life and the dramatic injuries that have taken place to tens of thousands of Palestinians. We are also increasingly concerned about the escalating tension along the border with Lebanon and the risk of regional expansion of the conflict. We would like to take this opportunity to offer our sincerest condolences to the families of the 197 UNWRA staff who've been killed in this conflict. We recognize the extraordinary commitment of UNWRA staff who have continued to heroically deliver assistance to those who need it most. We continue to be gravely concerned about all the reports of the deteriorating access for humanitarian aid into Gaza and within Gaza, at a time when Gazans need to see more aid, not less aid. Civilians, aid workers, and facilities must be protected. Beyond Gaza, we condemn the violent attacks by extremist settlers in the West Bank, as well as attacks on UNWRA premises and the threats to their operating environment, most recently in East Jerusalem. In the face of these dangers, we want to emphasize, and I share these words with many who have spoken before, UNWRA continues to be a lifeline for Palestinian refugees in Gaza and the West Bank, while at the same time working diligently to resolve challenges to their operating environment. Monsieur le Président, nous saluons la réponse rapide et professionnelle de l'UNWRA et des Nations Unies aux recommandations du rapport Colonna. Le Canada attend de l'UNWRA qu'il prenne toutes les mesures nécessaires pour renforcer la surveillance, la responsabilité et la transparence. Nous sommes déterminés à assurer la mise en œuvre des réformes nécessaires au sein de l'Office. Nous attendons de toutes les agences des Nations Unies qu'elles respectent la politique de tolérance zéro de l'ONU à l'égard du terrorisme sous toutes ses formes, ainsi que sa valeur de neutralité. Nous reconnaissons que ce travail est déjà en cours à l'UNWRA et que la mise en œuvre des recommandations Colonna et des implications financières à un moment où l'UNWRA est confrontée à un déficit de financement chronique. Alors nous allons continuer de travailler avec UNWRA et avec les Nations Unies sur cette question. Comme beaucoup d'autres qui sont ici, le Canada a signé la lettre d'engagement commun, ce qui constitue une promesse claire de notre soutien politique collectif, et ça va continuer. Regarding the latest allegations by the government of Israel with respect to the political activities of some involved in the past in the organization, we take these allegations seriously. We are pleased to see UNRWA's swift communications on the allegations, and we support the approach that's been outlined by the Commissioner General to engage Israel to seek further clarifications. We will continue to actively engage with UNRWA, the UN, and all donors on this matter, as well as look forward to further clarification from the government of Israel in this regard. But having said that, Mr. Chairman, I want to be very clear. We renewed our longstanding support to UNRWA, the core program, in 2023, with an announcement of $100 million over 4 years. We have also provided $21 million of additional humanitarian support throughout the current conflict, with another $25 million announced last month for the 2024 appeal for Gaza and the West Bank, bringing the total amount to $46 million. To those who say it's now the time to stop funding UNRWA, we can only respond by saying it is the clear conclusion of everyone who has studied and thought through this subject that no one can do the work that UNWRA is currently doing. No one else can substitute for UNWRA, and no one else can make up for what would be a humanitarian catastrophe if UNWRA were to cease doing the work that it is doing. The agency's work, together with the support that host governments provide, is essential for the well-being of millions, for regional stability, but also for the opportunities that adequate health care and education provide for millions of young people who are receiving those services, as well as millions of others. The truth is that UNWRA will remain essential until there is a clear pathway towards a future that meets the aspirations of Palestinians, Israelis, and countries in the region. That is precisely the future to which Canada is committed and to which we believe all of us, all countries, should remain committed. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
I should like to thank the distinguished representative of Canada. I now give the floor to the distinguished representative of Latvia.
President, first I would like to thank the Secretary General for mobilizing international support to UNWRA and commend the Commissioner General Lazzarini for his leadership in providing non-stop essential aid to Palestinian refugees. UNWRA serves as a lifeline for millions of Palestinians. UNWRA staff pay with their own lives to provide essential assistance amid ongoing military actions. Yet despite its critical role, the agency faces underfunding, hindering its ability to deliver. Let me underline that Latvia has been a consistent supporter and donor to UNWRA activities. On top of our long-term financial commitment at the national level, as a member of the European Union, Latvia is also proud to be part of the biggest contributing party to UNWRA. Moreover, at times when UNWRA faces funding shortfalls, Latvia has provided additional financial resources and will continue to do so. There is no alternative for UNWRA, as it provides critical services and ensures the backbone of education, healthcare and social services to all Palestinians. That is why Latvia joined UNWRA's shared commitments and thanks Jordan, Kuwait and Slovenia for this initiative. We commend the agency in implementing the recommendations outlined by the independent review group's final report. This process should continue in a transparent and coherent way, upholding UNWRA's neutrality with our support. The dire situation in Gaza cannot be described in words. Palestinian people have been plunged into an abyss of suffering, people displaced, infrastructure destroyed, no safe space remaining, children killed and maimed. And for this reason, Latvia also joined the call for action for Palestinian children in the West Bank and Gaza. Immediate relief must be accompanied by peace-building and peacekeeping component. Latvia continues to contribute to the UN peacekeeping missions in the region, namely UNIFIL and UNSO. Yet Latvia recognizes that long-term peace is only achievable through a political process based on full implementation of all relevant UN Security Council resolutions. In particular, Resolution 2736 on a comprehensive ceasefire agreement securing immediate end of hostilities and release of all hostages. Each day of delay means more casualties, more suffering, more death. The Palestinian people have suffered too much long ago. The path towards a long-term political settlement should begin without a delay. In closing, let me reiterate Latvia's unwavering support to UNWRA. We call on the international community to join efforts in forging sustainable funding to continue UNWRA's critical mission, provide consistent lifeline to Palestinian people. I thank you.
I should like to thank the distinguished representative of Latvia. I now give the floor to the distinguished representative of Sweden, who will be the last speaker this morning. Sweden, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. President and Commissioner General, who have left the building right now. But anyway, we want to thank you for convening today's annual pledging conference. We want to thank all UNWRA staff for their continued work during an exceptionally challenging year and for their tireless commitments to deliver life-saving support. We underscore our deepest condolences for the more than 197 UNRWA staff members who have lost their lives, as well as the severe damage inflicted on UNRWA facilities and operations. Mr. President, the human suffering in Gaza is beyond words. Civilians need to be protected in line with the international humanitarian law. Humanitarian access must be scaled up, and more efficient deconfliction mechanisms, as well as checkpoint procedures, are needed to allow for a sustainable flow of humanitarian aid. Sweden will also continue to advocate for that humanitarian staff and transports are allowed to move safely to deliver assistance in an effective, predictable and consistent way across all of Gaza. They are not and should never be a target. We are deeply concerned by the incitement against UNRWA in Israel and the attempts to undermine the work and credibility of the agency. We also express grave concern at the mounting number of access impediments and attempts to undermine the work of UNRWA, as well as other UN humanitarian workers. Humanitarian assistance must be allowed to reach those in need. UNRWA, like other UN and international organizations and diplomatic missions, need to be protected under international law, including the Convention on the Privileges and Immunities of the United Nations and international humanitarian law. Sweden condemns any attempt to label a UN agency as a terrorist organization. We welcome the swift action of UNRWA and the UN following the publication of allegations against some of its staff and the strong public commitment to fully implement the recommendations of the Colonna report. We welcome its key findings and that the agency acts consistent with the humanitarian principle of neutrality and request that UNRWA implement the recommendations. Since October last year, Sweden has increased its humanitarian assistance to Gaza by almost $50 million. This year, Sweden has made an initial contribution of $19 million in core funding to UNRWA and $3 million to UNRWA's flash appeals. Today, we can also announce that a decision has been made to proceed with a second disbursement of core funding to UNRWA of $9 million, following the agency's progress to further strengthen internal control and oversight mechanisms. Our core support to UNRWA comes in addition to Swedish core funding to all key humanitarian actors on the ground. Looking ahead, we must not lose sight of the need to address UNRWA's chronic financial difficulties more robustly and to proceed with necessary reforms. To ensure that UNRWA can continue its critical work to assist Palestinian refugees, UNRWA needs a sustainable and realistic budget where expenditure matches budget. We welcome UNRWA's efforts to seek solutions to the recurring financial crisis, including through broadening the donor base, and strongly encourage the agency to enhance these efforts. We are ready to support you in this work. Thank you very much, Mr. President.
I thank the distinguished representative of Sweden. Excellencies, distinguished delegates, we have heard the last speaker on the list for this morning. I do thank the interpreters for their flexibility. We will listen to the remaining delegations on the list of speakers this afternoon in this conference room at 3 p.m. The meeting is adjourned.
including the forcible and chronic displacement of refugees, namely through the end of the Israeli occupation of the Palestinian territories, including remaining Arab territories that were occupied and withdrawn to the 4th of June 1967 borders, and the achievement of the two-state solution, the establishment of the independent Palestinian state with Al-Quds al-Sharif as its capital. Thank you, Mr. President.
I thank the distinguished permanent representative of Saudi Arabia for his statement, and I now give the floor to the distinguished representative of Lebanon. The floor is yours.
سيد الرئيس، أتوجه بداية بالشكر لكم على الدعوة لهذا الاجتماع، وللأمين العام للأمم المتحدة السيد غوتيريش، وللمفوض العام للأونروا السيد لازاريني على كلمتيهما الوافيتين اللتين تبرزان حجم المأساة الإنسانية التي يمر بها سكان غزة، والدور المهم الذي تلعبه الأونروا باعتبارها العمود الفقري للعمل الإنساني التي لا غنى عنها في كافة ميادين اللجوء. السيد الرئيس، نشدد على ضرورة أن يؤكد المجتمع الدولي التزامه السياسي تجاه الوكالة في مواجهة أزمة وجودية وسط مساعي إسرائيل لتشويه سمعة الوكالة عبر شن حملات ممنهجة ومسيسة ضدها التي ثبت زيفها بشكل قاطع في تقرير فريق المراجعة المستقل الذي وضعته السيدة كولونيل. الأمر الذي دفع العديد من الدول التي علقت تمويلها للعودة عن قرارها، وهي خطوة مرحب بها. السيد الرئيس، إن خلق كيانات بديلة للأونروا ونقل صلاحياتها لهذه الكيانات لثبت فشله على الرغم من المحاولات المتكررة، وقد تحملت الأونروا خلال كافة مراحل الصراع العربي الإسرائيلي الضربات والهجمات على مقراتها وقتل موظفيها وجرحها في انتهاك واضح وصريح لأبسط قواعد القانون الدولي الإنساني. وعلى الرغم من هذه التضحيات أكملت الأونروا مسيرتها متجاوزة كل الصعاب والمحن، وإذ نوجه التحية لجميع الشهداء الذين سقطوا خلال العدوان الأخير، وننحني أمام تضحياتهم التي بذلوها في سبيل العمل الإنساني تخفيفا من معاناة اللاجئين الفلسطينيين. نشدد على ضرورة حماية مقرات وعاملي الوكالة اتساقا مع القوانين الدولية ذات الصلة. السيد الرئيس، يستضيف لبنان منذ العام 1948 حوالي نصف مليون لاجئ فلسطيني، وتحمل لبنان العبء الأكبر من تداعيات هذا اللجوء، وقد ساعدت وكالة الأونروا عبر خدماتها المتنوعة في التخفيف من حدة هذا العبء، كما ساهمت في تضميد جراح إخوتنا الفلسطينيين بعد كل ما عانوه من مآس وتهجير وقتل وتشريد. السيد الرئيس، الوضع داخل المخيمات صعب اجتماعيا واقتصاديا وماديا على الرغم من خدمات الأونروا المتعددة وعلى الرغم مما تقدمه الدولة اللبنانية. فلنتخيل معا كيف سيكون الوضع في غياب هذه الخدمات. مزيد من الفقر، مزيد من البؤس، ومزيد من التطرف، مما يعني أننا نهيئ هذه المخيمات للانفجار عند أول شرارة لا محالة. لذلك علينا العمل معا للحفاظ على ولاية الأونروا وتأمين مصادر تمويلها، وذلك حتى التوصل إلى حل نهائي للقضية الفلسطينية يضمن حق العودة لهؤلاء اللاجئين إلى دولتهم ويؤمن حلا مستداما لهذه القضية المحققة. وشكرا.
I thank the distinguished representative of Lebanon for his statement. And I now give the floor to the distinguished permanent representative of the United Kingdom. The floor is yours, ma'am.
Thank you, President. The devastating violence in Gaza has gone on for far too long, and I pay tribute to the work of UNWRA in unprecedentedly challenging circumstances and to the leadership of Commissioner General Lazzarini. In one of his first acts as the UK Prime Minister, Sir Keir Starmer set out the clear and urgent need for an immediate ceasefire that leads to a sustainable peace with security for Israelis and Palestinians alike. We're calling for the release of all the hostages, the upholding of international humanitarian law, and a rapid increase of humanitarian aid into Gaza. President, Palestinians in Gaza are facing a humanitarian catastrophe and the very real risk of famine. For months, they have suffered unbearable hardship without the food and the protection from harm that they need. Too many Palestinians, civilians, are being killed, and much of civilian infrastructure essential to life has been destroyed. The UK is committed to working with our international partners to alleviate this suffering and get more aid to the civilians who need it most. We welcome the UN's leadership role in coordinating and delivering the humanitarian response. We recognise that UNWRA is absolutely central to these efforts. It is playing a critically important role in getting aid to those who need it in Gaza and providing essential services, including healthcare and education, to Palestinian refugees across the region. So I want to take the opportunity again today to pay tribute to those brave and selfless UNWRA staff who face danger every day as they work to get aid to those in desperate need. Today, the UK stands with 117 member states, led by Jordan, Slovenia and Kuwait, in making clear our shared commitment to UNWRA and to make clear our support for the vital role it plays in saving lives and promoting regional stability, a fundamental building block for lasting peace. President, we were appalled by the allegations that UNWRA staff were involved in the 7 October attacks against Israel. The Secretary-General and the Commissioner-General of UNWRA took these allegations seriously and acted decisively. And we are confident that UNWRA is taking robust action in response to Catherine Colonna's independent review to ensure it meets the highest standards of neutrality, transparency and accountability. The UK recognises the importance of UNWRA's mandate and the need for UNWRA to operate on a sustainable financial footing. Following last week's elections in the United Kingdom, the new Foreign Secretary is closely considering resuming UK funding to UNWRA. I thank you.
I thank the distinguished permanent representative of the United Kingdom for her statement, and I now give the floor to the distinguished representative of the Russian Federation. The floor is yours.
Спасибо большое. Господин председатель, Российская Федерация высоко оценивает деятельность БАПОР, играющего критически важную и незаменимую роль в содействии палестинцам на оккупированной территории, а также в Ливане, Сирии и Иордании. Сохранение мандата агентства является залогом продолжения международных усилий по поиску решения одной из проблем окончательного статуса, фундаментального права палестинских беженцев на возвращение. Миллионы палестинцев пользуются поддержкой агентства в сферах образования,
enjoy the agency's support in the areas of education, health, public services, and food assistance. The majority of Gaza Strip residents turn to UNWRA experts for medical services. At the same time, the agency has to work in extremely dangerous and inhumane conditions. Over the 9 months of the escalation of the Palestinian-Israeli conflict, 197 UNWRA staff members have been killed, including 3 who died as a result of an IDF missile attack on July 5th. They fearlessly gave their lives, helping Palestinians to the last day as they attempted to survive in the midst of a full-fledged Israeli military operation in the enclave. Since October 7th, 2023, a total of 188 agencies' facilities have been damaged in Gaza. There is growing concern over the Israeli leadership's campaign against UNWRA and the physical harassment of UNWRA staff. A legislation package is currently under consideration in the Knesset that would classify UNWRA as a terrorist organization
revoke the immunities and privileges of UN staff, and prohibit them from working in the occupied Palestinian territories. Attacks and arson of the agency's office in East Jerusalem's Sheikh Jarrah are also part of this pattern. Unfortunately, Israeli authorities have not yet responded in any way to relevant appeals from the United Nations recalling the need to comply with the requirements of the UN Conventions on Privileges and Immunities of 1946, as well as calls for an independent investigation into these incidents and attacks. In addition, Israel's course towards winding down UNRWA presence in the occupied Palestinian territories runs counter to its obligations as an occupying power, as well as obligations that it assumed upon its admission to the UN, including of the implementation of GA Resolution 194 and the right of Palestinian refugees to return and compensation. We resolutely reject the smear campaign against UNRWA, which is based on still unproven accusations that some of its staff members allegedly supported the October 7th Hamas attacks. At the same time, Commissioner General Lazarini's repeated requests to the government of Israel to provide relevant information and evidence remain unanswered. We also note that the group of experts headed by former French Minister of Foreign Affairs Catherine Colonna confirmed UNRWA's compliance with the principle of neutrality and its key role in continuing to provide vital assistance to Palestinians. We welcome the decision of a number of countries to make additional financial contributions to UNRWA, as well as the unfreezing of funding to the agency by a number of donors. We call on others to follow their example and restore their contributions in full. For our part, we remain committed to our long-term obligations to make annual voluntary contributions to the agency, whose activities have a stabilizing effect on the entire Middle East region. We were prepared to make an annual voluntary contribution in the amount of $2 million to UNRWA by today's event. However, due to the illegal unilateral sanctions imposed by Western states, it has so far been impossible to make that payment. Mr. President, in conclusion, we would like to once again call on both parties to the conflict for an unconditional and immediate establishment of a permanent ceasefire in Gaza, without which full humanitarian assistance to all those in need is impossible, as well as the release of all hostages and detainees. We are convinced that there is no alternative to a political settlement of the Palestinian-Israeli conflict on the basis of a two-state solution in which Israel and Palestine would coexist in peace and security within 1967 borders. I thank you.
I thank the distinguished representative of the Russian Federation for his statement, and I now give the floor to the distinguished representative of Cyprus.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you for convening this conference and also the Secretary General and the Commissioner General for their sobering remarks this morning. I wish to express Cyprus's appreciation to the work of UNRWA in both the humanitarian and development fields, and notably for the vital services it has been providing in areas such as education, healthcare, relief, and social services to 6 million Palestinian refugees for the last 75 years. In this respect, I wish to commend UNRWA staff for their tireless dedication, particularly in the present environment, and pay tribute to the 195 staff killed. It is necessary to safeguard UNRWA's critical role, both in the current context and within the framework of a transition. Cyprus emphasizes the importance of reaching a two-state solution as a matter of urgency and in the interest of lasting peace and stability. UNRWA's contribution to regional stability must be recognized, as should be the risks stemming from any interruption to its work. Upholding neutrality, impartiality, and independence is essential for the fulfillment of its mandate, and as such, we support the implementation of the recommendations of the Colonna report. Finally, I wish to announce that the government of the Republic of Cyprus will be donating the modest amount of €600,000 towards the crucial humanitarian work carried out by the agency, while we have also joined the shared commitments as an expression of our consistent support. Thank you.
I thank the distinguished representative of Cyprus for her statement, and I now give the floor to the distinguished permanent representative of the United Arab Emirates. The floor is yours, sir.
السيد الرئيس أشكركم على الدعوة لعقد هذا الاجتماع الهام. كما أشكر الأمين العام للأمم المتحدة والمفوض العام للأونروا على جهودهما المتواصلة في دعم اللاجئين الفلسطينيين. نجتمع اليوم في ظل كارثة إنسانية غير مسبوقة في غزة مع دخول الحرب شهرها العاشر، في الوقت الذي تواصل فيه إسرائيل هجماتها التي معظم سكان القطاع على النزوح مرارا وتكرارا دون أن يتمكنوا من العثور على أي مكان آمن، وفي ظل غياب شبه تام للخدمات الأساسية بغزة بما فيها الخدمات الصحية والتعليمية، إلى جانب خطر المجاعة الذي يلوح في الأفق. وفي هذا السياق تتضامن بلادي مع جهود الأونروا لمواصلة دورها الحيوي على الرغم من التحديات الخطيرة التي تقوض من قدرتها على تنفيذ ولايتها، خاصة بعد مقتل قرابة 200 من موظفيها خلال عملها في ظروف خطيرة، وتعرض العديد من منشآتها للقصف والهجمات الإسرائيلية. ونؤكد رفضنا لأي محاولات لتقويض دور الأونروا، فالعمل الذي تقوم به الوكالة لا غنى عنه ولا يمكن استبداله. وعلى ضوء ذلك تواصل بلادي دعمها الراسخ للشعب الفلسطيني، حيث قدمت الإمارات بعد اندلاع الحرب في غزة في أكتوبر الماضي مساهمة إضافية للأونروا بلغت $20 مليون لدعم الأشقاء الفلسطينيين في غزة، بالإضافة إلى تقديم $15 مليون في العام الماضي كمساهمة إضافية لدعم إعادة إعمار مخيم جنين. كما شملت جهود الإمارات إنشاء مستشفى ميداني في غزة استقبل حتى الآن 21,000 حالة، وإنشاء مستشفى عائم في العريش، إلى جانب استضافة ما يزيد من 700 من المصابين ومرضى السرطان من غزة لتلقي الرعاية الطبية في الإمارات. كما أنشأت بلادي 6 محطات لتحلية المياه يستفيد منها أكثر من 600,000 شخص في غزة، بالإضافة إلى تقديم قرابة 40,000 طن من الإمدادات العاجلة وتفعيل الممر البحري من قبرص إلى غزة بالتعاون مع الشركاء وإلى جانب جهودنا الإنسانية انضمت بلادي لأكثر من 117 دولة في دعم بيان الالتزامات المشتركة حول الأونروا الذي أطلق صباح اليوم، مبادرة هامة من الأردن والكويت وسلوفينيا. وتؤكد بلادي على ضرورة استمرار المجتمع الدولي في دعم الوكالة في أداء دورها الحيوي في غزة وسائر مناطق عملها، والذي يمنح بصيصا من الأمل للاجئين الفلسطينيين في هذه الظروف الصعبة. وفي هذا السياق نرحب بقيام الغالبية العظمى من المانحين الذين قاموا بتعليق تمويلهم للوكالة سابقا باستئناف دعمهم، ونتطلع لعودة من تبقى من المانحين. كما نشيد بجهود الأونروا في تنفيذ التوصيات الواردة في تقرير مجموعة المراجعة المستقلة للأونروا بقيادة كاثرين كولونا، والذي من شأنه تحسين أساليب عمل الوكالة وضمان استمرارية تمويلها وعملها على المدى الطويل. ونشدد على أن دور الأونروا
that the role of UNWRA will remain essential in providing the necessary services to the Palestinian refugees until a just and comprehensive solution for the Palestinian issue is reached, including the plight of its refugees in accordance with relevant United Nations resolutions. In conclusion, the UAE appreciates the efforts of UNWRA workers who continue their noble duties under extremely dangerous conditions, and we call on all members of the international community to continue working towards an immediate and permanent ceasefire in Gaza and to put pressure on all parties to ensure the protection of humanitarian workers and unimpeded access to humanitarian assistance and basic services at large scale and without any obstacles. Thank you, Mr. President.
I thank the distinguished permanent representative of the United Arab Emirates for his statement, and I now give the floor to the distinguished permanent representative of the Syrian Arab Republic. The floor is yours, sir.
شكرا سيد الرئيس. نشكركم على عقد هذا الاجتماع الهام.
Chairman, we thank you for convening this important meeting, and we thank Mr. Lazzarini, Commissioner General of UNWRA, for his intervention and for his efforts, as well as the efforts of his colleagues among the UNWRA staff. Mr. Chairman, this conference is an important opportunity, another opportunity to express our solidarity with Palestinian people and UNRWA, which plays a very important and irreplaceable role in providing support for the people of Palestine, both in Palestine and in neighboring states, in spite of the huge challenges that the agency faces due to the genocide committed by Israel against the Palestinian people, as well as the attempts of the occupation authorities to eliminate the agency and the deliberate targeting of its staff, the destruction of its headquarters and schools by savage bombing, also depriving it of financing, even though it urgently needs this support to respond to the unspeakable suffering in Gaza. Mr. Chairman, the General Assembly of the United Nations created UNRWA 75 years ago with the goal of providing aid to the Palestinian refugees who were forced by aggression, savage massacres, and terrorism of Israelis to leave their homes and country to take refuge in other areas of Palestine or in neighboring Arab states, including my country, Syria. Today, as UNRWA faces an existential challenge, the Syrian Arab Republic reiterates once again its refusal of attempts to undermine the role and efforts of UNRWA to serve the agenda of Israel aimed at liquidating the Palestinian cause, including the right of return. Syria condemns the unjust bias and limitless support of the American administration and many of its partners to the Israeli entity, so that it continues with its aggression and constant attempts to cause an escalation in the region. This bias and the support to Israel has demonstrated the hypocrisy, double standards, and manipulation of international law that is undertaken by the U.S. administration and many of its partners and allies. Mr. Chairman, my delegation would like to express our condolences to the Commissioner General of UNRWA and the families of 195 staff members, as well as other humanitarian workers who have perished due to the savage Israeli aggression against Gaza. My delegation urges donor states to provide the necessary funding to UNRWA quickly in order to respond to the immense needs in a flexible, sufficient, lasting, and predictable fashion. To continue providing this support to the Palestinian people in their homeland and in other host countries, including Syria, which hosts hundreds of thousands of our Palestinian brothers. Syria will continue providing services as well as support to our Palestinian brothers and sisters in Syria, including through cooperation with UNRWA. In conclusion, Mr. Chairman, Syria would like to underscore the need for an immediate end of the Israeli aggression and to deliver humanitarian aid in sufficient quantities and unimpeded to the inhabitants of Gaza, prevent their expulsion, and ensure accountability so that Israel will not remain unpunished punished. We reiterate our support for the right of the brethren Palestinian people to create their independent state with Al-Quds as the capital, as a member state of the UN. Thank you very much.
I thank the distinguished permanent representative of the Syrian Arab Republic for his statement, and I now give the floor to the distinguished permanent representative of Thailand.
So, Vice President, thank you so much for giving me the floor. The unprecedented humanitarian crisis for Palestine refugees remains our deep concern. Full, urgent, and uninterrupted humanitarian assistance for essential supplies and services to reach all civilians in need in Gaza must be fulfilled. Thailand commends the work and dedication of UNWRA for over 7 decades, as well as its indispensable role in delivering assistance to improve the livelihoods of over 5.9 million Palestine refugees, including children and women, despite the inadequate resources amid extreme situation on the ground. Since 1978, Thailand has consistently made contributions to the agency. We are committed to our multi-year pledge for our voluntary contribution to UNWRA in the total amount of $200,000 for the year 2022 to 2026. We also made a contribution of $80,000 for the emergency flash appeal of UNWRA last year. To reaffirm our commitment in supporting the work of UNWRA, I wish to take this opportunity to announce the provision of an additional $50,000 in financial contribution to the second UNWRA flash appeal for the occupied Palestinian territory, covering the period from April to December 2024. We hope that our contributions will help enable UNWRA to continue its work in response to the currently dire humanitarian situation. Mr. Vice President, we joined the statement of shared commitments on UNWRA with other 117 countries. We also echo the Secretary General and other member states in appealing to the international community and all stakeholders to resume and continue to actively support UNWRA's life-saving assistance. The predictable, sustained, and sufficient funding will allow the agency to continue its work and aid delivery without delay to provide healthcare, education, social protection, and better livelihoods for Palestine refugees in the region. Last but not least, we reiterate our call for all parties to fully comply with their obligations under international law and relevant Security Council's resolutions, particularly in regard to the immediate ceasefire, the immediate and unconditional release of all remaining hostages, including Thai nationals, the protection of civilians and civilian objects, and the protection of humanitarian and UN personnel and humanitarian facilities and assets. We also call for continuing and utmost restraint by all parties so that the situation does not deteriorate further, as it will inevitably have an impact on innocent civilians. I thank you.
I thank the distinguished permanent representative of Thailand for his statement, and I now give the floor to the distinguished representative of India.
Thank you, Mr. President. We welcome your initiative to convene the Ad Hoc Committee of the General Assembly for the announcement of voluntary contributions to UNWRA. I thank Secretary General Antonio Guterres and the Commissioner General of UNWRA, Filipe Lazzarini, for their remarks. Let me begin by reaffirming India's historic and unwavering commitment to the peaceful resolution of the Palestine question. India has always supported a negotiated two-state solution leading to the establishment of a sovereign, independent, and viable state of Palestine, living within secure and recognized borders side by side at peace with Israel. India has taken a principled position on the ongoing Israel-Hamas conflict in Gaza and strongly condemned the death of civilians, especially women and children. The barbaric terrorist attack on 7th October last year deserves our unequivocal condemnation, and we demand unconditional release of all hostages. We have also been emphasizing respect for international law and international humanitarian law under all circumstances. Mr. President, UNRWA's role to assuage the difficult humanitarian situation remains critical, particularly its humanitarian and social services to the Palestinian refugee community living in Palestine, Syria, Jordan, and Lebanon. India has been a trusted development partner for the people of Palestine. Our developmental assistance to Palestine in various forms over the years amounts to close to $120 million, including $35 million as contribution to UNRWA. India has been providing annual contribution to UNRWA of $5 million from 2018. I'm happy to inform that we will be continuing our annual contribution of $5 million this year as well. And out of this, $2.5 million will be transferred to UNRWA in the coming days. We are providing scholarship to 50 students from Palestine to pursue undergraduate, postgraduate, and doctoral studies in various educational institutions in India. We are also donating medicines to UNRWA on their specific request. There is also a request from Palestinian Authority for life-saving medicines, which we are actively considering. We also appeal to other traditional donors of UNRWA to consider enhancing their support and non-donor member states to consider financial contributions to UNRWA. We reiterate the need for safe, timely, and sustained supply of humanitarian assistance to the people of Palestine. Thank you.
I thank the distinguished representative of India for his statement, and I now give the floor to the distinguished permanent representative of Bangladesh. The floor is yours, sir.
Thank you, Mr. President, and I thank you for organizing this pledging conference. And I also thank the Secretary General for his statement of support for UNRWA. I also thank the Commissioner General of UNRWA, Mr. Philip Lazzarini, for his informative and insightful briefing. I wish to take this opportunity to commend the Commissioner General and his team for their extraordinary work in supporting the Palestinians, especially during this ongoing humanitarian catastrophe in Gaza and increasing violence in the West Bank, including East Jerusalem. Mr. President, despite repeated calls from the international community as well as numerous General Assembly and Security Council resolutions calling for ceasefire, Israeli aggression in Gaza has not been stopped. Rather, it has escalated. For the last 9 months, the people in Gaza have been subjected to unprecedented atrocities, which has also significantly affected the work of UNRWA. As of now, a total of 197 UNRWA personnel have been killed in Gaza, the highest number of casualties in the history of the United Nations. This is atrocious, and such onslaught on humanitarian workers is totally unacceptable and must be accounted for. We pay our deepest tribute to all the humanitarian workers, including those serving the operations of UNRWA, for their courage, dedication, and sacrifice. Mr. President, despite significant funding shortfall, UNRWA has been serving the people in the occupied Palestinian territory. As rightly stated by the Secretary General, quote, UNRWA is the lifeline of hope and dignity, unquote. With the current humanitarian devastation in Palestine, it appears impossible for UNRWA to sustain its operation without additional funding. We commend those who continued their funding to UNRWA and call upon all traditional and non-traditional donors to pledge in favor of UNRWA's response plan. It is our collective duty to keep UNRWA fully functional with adequate resources. We are pleased to join the statement of shared commitments on UNRWA, recognizing its role and contribution and urging for more support. We also call upon the occupying authority to ensure unrestricted access for UNRWA to the occupied Palestinian territory and the safety and security of the humanitarian workers so that they are able to run the humanitarian operations without fear and intimidation. Mr. President, Bangladesh has been a consistent supporter of UNRWA's critical mandate and have been making regular contributions to the agency. In keeping with our tradition, we are going to make a contribution of United States dollars 50,000 to UNWRA for 2024 as well. Before I conclude, I wish to reiterate my country's commitment to UNWRA's mandate and also for a permanent ceasefire in the occupied Palestinian territory and to resume diplomatic process for establishment of an independent Palestinian state in accordance with the pre-1967 border and with East Jerusalem as its capital. I thank you, Mr. President.
I thank the distinguished permanent representative of Bangladesh for his statement, and I now give the floor to the distinguished permanent representative of Kuwait.
معالي السيد أنطونيو غوتيريش الأمين العام للأمم المتحدة أصحاب السعادة شكرا معاليكم بداية على دعوتكم لعقد هذا الاجتماع الهام على ما طرحتموه قبل قليل من ترجمة نبوية تحكي الواقع الأليم في فلسطين وما يشهده شعبها المستضعف من فجاعة لا يمكن الكلمات أن تعبر عنها فإننا جميعا هنا على علم تام وإدراك مطلق بأن الوضع المعيشي لشعب فلسطين الآزل مرتبط ارتباطا كبيرا بحالة وكالة الأمم المتحدة لغوث وتشغيل اللاجئين الفلسطينيين في الشرق الأدنى وأن انتعاش الحالة المعيشية لهذا الشعب الكريم وبدرجة كبيرة من انتعاش الوكالة وترديها في المقابل من تردي النفق التدفقي للحماية وما أتت المساهمة المالية الإضافية لدولة الكويت بالعام الجاري والتي قدمناها مؤخرا إلا تجسيدا حرفيا للإيمان الراسخ للقيادة السياسية بضرورة ألا نترك الأشقاء الفلسطينيين في مواجهتهم بهذا الواقع المريض وأن نستمر بدعمهم طالما استمرت قضيتنا المركزية. وقد شملت جهودنا في إطار الأمم المتحدة ولدلالة الموقف بالمشاركة بتأسيس المبادرة الخاصة بالالتزامات المشتركة حول وكالة الأنوروا مع كل من المملكة الأردنية الهاشمية وجمهورية سلوفينيا والتي انضمت لها حتى اليوم 118 دولة. وبهذه المناسبة أدعو جميع الدول المؤمنة بمقاصد منظومتنا الدولية الانضمام للمساهمة في دفع الوكالة وتعزيز آفاقها المرجوة. وفي الختام أجدد معالي الأمين العام على دعوتكم لعقد هذا أجدد الإشادة لمعالي الأمين العام على دعوتكم لعقد هذا الاجتماع متطلعين لرؤية تعاون دولي أوسع في الفترة القادمة يأخذ بعين الاعتبار وقبل كل اعتبار شعب فلسطين المستضعف ومشاغله وحاجاته الأساسية وأن نستمر جميعا لتعزيز المداخيل المالية للوكالة الأممية ودعمها بشكل شامل. وشكرا جزيلا.
I thank the distinguished representative of Kuwait for his statement, and I now give the floor to the distinguished representative of New Zealand.
Good afternoon, everybody, and good afternoon, Mr. President. Vice President, thank you for convening this meeting. Thank you also to the Secretary-General this morning and the UNWRA Commissioner-General for their frank and sober briefings today. Let me start by expressing New Zealand's condolences for the loss of 197 UNWRA staff in the Israel-Hamas conflict. Such a loss of humanitarians is tragic and unacceptable. We also extend our appreciation to UNWRA's staff and other humanitarian responders working under the most difficult of circumstances in Gaza and the West Bank. New Zealand has consistently stressed the importance of upholding international law in the Israel-Hamas conflict. Protecting civilians, humanitarians, medical workers and their facilities is paramount. It is an obligation of international humanitarian law that falls on all parties to the conflict. This protection unequivocally applies to UNWRA staff and its installations. UNWRA is delivering critical assistance for millions of Palestinians, especially those in Gaza. There is no other organisation that has the presence, systems, and infrastructure required to support Palestinian refugees. In this vein, respect for UNWRA's mandate is critical. New Zealand is deeply concerned by Israeli constraints on UNWRA's ability to operate in Gaza and the West Bank. We are also concerned by efforts to discredit UNWRA, including through the spread of dis- and misinformation about UNWRA's activities and role. New Zealand acknowledges UNWRA has important internal reforms underway. We have received assurances from the UN that UNWRA will act on the outcomes of the Office of Internal Oversight Services investigation into the serious allegations that certain UNWRA staff participated in Hamas's 7th October terrorist attacks against Israel. Relatedly, New Zealand is closely following UNWRA's implementation of the recommendations of the Catherine Colonna External Review. It is essential that UNWRA and its staff uphold humanitarian principles, including neutrality and UN values. New Zealand has supported UNWRA since its establishment in 1949 and has most recently joined the Shared Commitments for UNWRA. Under our current arrangement, we will provide UNWRA with $1 million in untagged and flexible core funding annually, and we have provided over 28 million New Zealand dollars in support over the past 2 decades. Separately to our support for UNWRA, New Zealand has provided $22 million to support the humanitarian response in Gaza and the West Bank since October 7th. Our expectations of UNWRA are clear, as are our expectations of all parties to the Israel-Hamas conflict. Compliance with international law, including international humanitarian law, is non-negotiable, and we call on all parties to honour UNWRA's General Assembly mandate. Thank you, Mr. President.
I thank the distinguished permanent representative of New Zealand for her statement, and I now give the floor to the distinguished representative of Bahrain.
السيد الرئيس، بداية أود أن أشكركم على عقد هذا الاجتماع لجنة الجمعية العامة المخصصة للإعلان التبرعات للأونروا، خاصة في ظل الحرب المستمرة على قطاع غزة والمأساة الإنسانية المؤلمة التي يعاني منها الشعب الفلسطيني الشقيق. كما أتوجه بالشكر لمعالي السيد أنطونيو غوتيريش الأمين العام للأمم المتحدة على مساعيه الحثيثة للنهوض بمسؤوليات منظمة الأمم المتحدة، لا سيما الدور الحيوي لوكالة الأونروا في تقديم المساعدة الإنسانية وتعزيز الاستقرار في المنطقة. ولا يفوتني أن أشيد بجهود سعادة السيد فيليبي لازاريني المفوض العام وكافة موظفي وكالة الأونروا في توفير مختلف سبل الدعم إلى أبناء الشعب الفلسطيني الشقيق في هذه الظروف الصعبة، حيث راح ما يقارب 200 من موظفي الوكالة ضحية في قطاع غزة. السيد الرئيس، تجدد مملكة البحرين دعوتها للمجتمع الدولي إلى التدخل العاجل لتطبيق قواعد القانون الدولي والقانون الدولي الإنساني وقرارات الشرعية الدولية ذات الصلة بحماية المدنيين ومقار وموظفي المنظمات الأممية والخيرية المعنية بتقديم المساعدات الإنسانية والإغاثية لأبناء الشعب الفلسطيني الشقيق، لا سيما في قطاع غزة. ورحبت مملكة البحرين بنتائج تقرير اللجنة المستقلة بشأن حيادية وكالة الأونروا ومهنيتها، باعتباره شهادة دولية من الأمم المتحدة إلى الدول المانحة لمواصلة التزاماتها المالية وتأدية واجباتها الإنسانية في دعم وكالة الأونروا وتمكينها من استدامة جهودها الإغاثية والإنسانية والتنموية المقدمة للشعب الفلسطيني الشقيق، حتى التوصل إلى حل سياسي عادل يلبي حقوقه المشروعة في العودة والتعويض وإقامة دولته المستقلة وفقا للقانون الدولي وقرارات الشرعية الدولية. وكانت مملكة البحرين مساهما دائما في برامج الأونروا الأساسية منذ عام 2000 من خلال المؤسسة الملكية للأعمال الإنسانية، وقد قامت بإنشاء العديد من المشاريع التنموية المهمة في قطاع غزة بالتعاون مع الوكالة بما في ذلك المكتبات والمدارس والمراكز الصحية والمختبرات العلمية وإقامة المشاريع التنموية وذلك انطلاقا من إيماننا بأهمية مساندة الدور المحوري للأونروا في خدمة ودعم اللاجئين الفلسطينيين وتوفير الإغاثة ودعم التنمية لملايين الأشخاص في الأراضي الفلسطينية والأردن وسوريا ولبنان. وختاما السيد الرئيس تجدد مملكة البحرين دعمها للجهود النبيلة التي تبذلها وكالة الأونروا وتدعو إلى تضافر الجهود الدولية لفرض تطبيق القرارات الدولية وقواعد القانون الدولي الإنساني بشأن الوقف الفوري والدائم والشامل لإطلاق النار في قطاع غزة وحماية المدنيين الأبرياء وتيسير تدفق المساعدات الإنسانية والإغاثية إلى سكان قطاع غزة بشكل كامل وآمن ومستدام ودون عوائق ووضع حد للكارثة الإنسانية في القطاع وتهيئة الأجواء الآمنة لإحياء عملية السلام العادل والشامل بحصول الشعب الفلسطيني الشقيق على حقوقه المشروعة بإقامة دولته المستقلة وعاصمتها القدس الشرقية. وشكرا.
I thank the distinguished representative of Bahrain for her statement, and I now give the floor to the distinguished permanent representative of Switzerland. The floor is yours.
Merci, Monsieur le Président, chers collègues. La Suisse remercie le Président de l'Assemblée générale des Nations Unies pour la tenue de cette conférence et le secrétaire général ainsi que le commissaire général de leurs mots d'introduction. Mon pays reste extrêmement préoccupé par le conflit au Proche-Orient et ses conséquences dramatiques pour la population civile. La Suisse n'a cessé d'appeler à un cessez-le-feu et au strict respect du droit international humanitaire et des droits humains par toutes les parties au conflit, et elle en condamne les violations. À ce titre aussi, nous réitérons notre appel à la libération de tous les otages encore détenus à Gaza. La situation humanitaire à Gaza est catastrophique. Or, l'aide humanitaire y arrivant reste largement insuffisante. Cette aide doit pouvoir être acheminée de manière sûre, rapide et sans entrave, conformément au droit international humanitaire. Et ceci par tous les points de passage et dans toute la bande de Gaza. Il est donc urgent que les parties au conflit ainsi que les autres parties prenantes intensifient leurs efforts en ce sens. Une fois de plus, la semaine dernière, une école de l'UNWRA qui accueillait près de 2000 personnes déplacées a été touchée par des frappes aériennes, faisant des dizaines de victimes. Nous condamnons fermement ces attaques et nous rappelons également que tous les civils, le personnel humanitaire et médical, les infrastructures civiles, y compris celles de l'UNWRA, ainsi que les unités et moyens de transport sanitaire, medical units and means of transport are protected by international humanitarian law. The number of humanitarian workers killed in Gaza is absolutely unacceptable. This must end. We express our sincerest condolences to the loved ones of the 197 UNWRA staff members who have been killed. UNWRA is by far the most important humanitarian actor in Gaza. No other organization currently has the capacity to fully take on its tasks. That is why Switzerland has decided to contribute 10 million francs to the UNWRA emergency appeal for Gaza. This amount is intended for basic needs such as food, water, shelter, health services and logistics. Dans ce contexte, la pleine mise en œuvre des recommandations du rapport Colonna est indispensable et représente une étape impérative vers une neutralité plus robuste de l'agence. À ce titre, la Suisse salue aussi l'élaboration par l'UNWRA d'un plan d'action dont nous attendons que l'UNWRA le mette pleinement en œuvre. Parallèlement, nous restons préoccupés par les allégations contre certains employés de l'agence et attendant de l'enquête de l'ONU qu'elle puisse faire de la lumière. Monsieur le Président, nous le savons toutes et tous, l'augmentation seule de l'aide humanitaire ne saura pas constituer une solution durable pour le conflit au Proche-Orient. Il faut une cessation des hostilités et il faut un horizon politique et il doit être urgemment rétabli. Nous réitérons notre ferme soutien à la solution à deux États, Israël et la Palestine, dont Gaza fait partie intégrante, vivant côte à côte en paix à l'intérieur de frontières sûres et
side in peace within safe, secure and recognized border. This is the only possible foundation for lasting peace in the region. I thank you.
I thank the distinguished permanent representative of Switzerland for her statement, and I now give the floor to the distinguished representative of China.
我感谢古特雷斯秘书长的
致辞和拉扎里尼主任专员的通报。加沙中度爆发9个多月，造成了前所未有的人道灾难，人道援助成为上百万民众的生存希望。联合国近东巴勒斯坦难民救济和工程处作为加沙人道援助的中流砥柱，一直在加沙坚守。迄今已有190多名工程处的员工遇难。我们向仍在坚守的人道工作者表示最崇高的敬意，向遇难者表示最深切的哀悼。工程处依据联大决议授权，向巴勒斯坦难民提供救济。所有国家都应给予支持和便利。古特雷斯秘书长多次强调，工程处对加沙人道救援的作用无法替代。工程处还为约旦河西岸、约旦、黎巴嫩、叙利亚等地的巴勒斯坦难民提供救济，对于维护地区稳定发挥着重要作用。工程处近期持续遭到以色列系统性的攻击指责和不合理的打压限制，中方对此表示严重关切和坚决反对。由科隆纳女士领导的独立审查小组已经发表报告，明确指出工程处设有大量健全的机制，确保机构中立性。关于工程处中立性的结论已经结束，希望有关国家尽快恢复工资，缓解工程处日益严重的财政危机。主席，中方长期向巴勒斯坦提供人道和发展援助，始终支持工程处积极履职。加沙冲突爆发以来，中方已向加沙提供多批援助。在今年5月的中阿合作论坛第10届部长级会议上，习近平主席宣布，中方将在前期1亿元人民币紧急人道援助的基础上，再提供5亿元人民币援助，支持缓解加沙人道主义危机和战后重建。还将向工程处提供300万美元捐款，支持工程处向加沙地区提供紧急人道主义援助。我们赞赏科威特、约旦、斯洛文尼亚等国发起支持工程处的联合声明，中方已经决定加入。我们呼吁国际社会继续支持工程处开展工作。主席，立即在加沙实现持久停火是缓解人道灾难、挽救无辜生命的根本出路。中方将继续同国际社会一道，为早日平息加沙战火、缓解人道灾难、落实2国方案做出不懈努力。谢谢。
I thank the distinguished representative of China for his statement, and I now give the floor to the distinguished representative of the Republic of Korea.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Let me begin by thanking the President of the General Assembly, the Secretary General, and the Commissioner General of the UNWRA for convening today's timely pledging conference and for their efforts to unite the international community on behalf of Palestinian refugees. For over 7 decades, UNWRA has provided education, health care, relief, and social services to over 5 million Palestinians in the Gaza Strip, West Bank, Jordan, Lebanon, and Syria, where refugee camps have evolved from tent cities to massive urban settlements. This wouldn't have been possible without the dedication of UNWRA and contributions from member states. Since last October, UNWRA has provided a vital humanitarian lifeline to the Palestinians in Gaza. Now, our attention and support for UNWRA is more critical than ever to improving the humanitarian situation in Gaza. Nearly 200 UNWRA personnel have lost their lives serving in Gaza. Let me take this opportunity to pay tribute to their sacrifice. I hope our efforts for protection of humanitarian and UN personnel will make meaningful progress. The Korean government contributed $7.6 million to the General Fund of UNWRA in May in response to the deteriorating humanitarian situation in Gaza. We hope that this will help save more of the affected people in Gaza. Once again, I appreciate UNWRA's dedicated efforts in providing humanitarian assistance to the Palestinian people. I thank you.
I thank the distinguished representative of Korea for his statement, and I now give the floor to the distinguished representative of Pakistan.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. Let me begin by thanking the President of the General Assembly for convening this vital pledging conference to secure additional financial support for the United Nations Relief and Works Agency for Palestine refugees. I also thank the Secretary General of the United Nations and the Commissioner General of UNWRA for their remarks. We commend the indispensable efforts of UNWRA, which, in accordance with its mandate, continue to provide life-saving assistance, including education, health, relief, and social services programs, as well as emergency aid in the occupied Palestinian territory. We extend our heartfelt condolences and honor the memory of the 197 UNRWA staff members who tragically lost their lives in this ongoing conflict. Mr. Vice President, over the past 8 months, Israel's genocidal military aggression in Gaza has resulted in the tragic loss of over 37,000 Palestinian lives, with more than 84,000 injured, a significant number of whom are women and children. This conflict has displaced the entire 2.3 million population of Gaza, underscoring the urgent need for humanitarian aid and international solidarity. Pakistan unequivocally condemns these atrocities and stands in full solidarity with our Palestinian brothers and sisters during these challenging times. Mr. Vice President, since last October, Pakistan has dispatched over 8 plane loads carrying more than 2,000 tons of humanitarian aid to Gaza, and we remain committed to providing further relief and support. We echo the assessment that current funding levels for UNRWA are insufficient to meet the critical needs of the Palestinian people in Gaza in the upcoming months. It is therefore imperative that we prioritize the continuity of UNRWA's operations to provide life-saving assistance to the people of Gaza. Pakistan supports a comprehensive plan for the reconstruction of Gaza in accordance with UN Resolution 2735, as announced by the Deputy Prime Minister and Foreign Minister of Pakistan at the high-level conference on urgent humanitarian response for Gaza, held in Amman, Jordan on 11 June 2024. We also stand ready to partner in the reconstruction of educational institutions in Gaza. Mr. President, to conclude, we call for the urgent implementation of the peace plan for Gaza as outlined in the Security Council Resolution 2735. I thank you.
I thank the distinguished representative of Pakistan for her statement, and I now give the floor to the distinguished representative of South Africa.
Thank you, Mr. President. We thank you for convening the meeting of the Ad Hoc Committee of the General Assembly for the announcement of voluntary contributions to the United Nations Relief and Works Agency for Palestine refugees in the Near East, UNWRA. We also thank the Secretary General, Mr. Antonio Guterres, and the Commissioner General of UNWRA, Mr. Philippe Lazzarini, for their respective briefings, and we express our appreciation for their continued efforts to support the people of Palestine through UNWRA and other means. Mr. President, South Africa reaffirms its full support to UNRWA's indispensable role in providing life-saving humanitarian assistance and human development services. This agency is the backbone of humanitarian operations in Gaza and beyond the Strip. It has championed human development for Palestinian refugees in occupied Palestinian territory, as well as Jordan, Lebanon, and the Syrian Arab Republic. It's therefore important for states to reaffirm their political and financial support for the vital work of the agency. South Africa is pleased to announce that in the recent pledging conference organized in Jordan, our country's new Minister of International Relations and Cooperation, Mr. Ronald Lamola, announced a 50 million rand, or approximately $2.7 million pledge to UNWRA. South Africa is also pleased to be one of the signatories of the shared commitment to support UNWRA, recognizing that the agency is a lifeline for generations of Palestinian refugees and a factor of stability in the region. We are deeply concerned with the political and financial challenges faced by UNWRA and their impact on the agency's ability to fulfill its mandate in the occupied Palestinian territory and beyond. South Africa welcomes global efforts aimed at ameliorating these challenges, including pledging conferences being organized to raise such much-needed funds for the agency. Mr. President, despite the agency's commitment and dedication to the social welfare of Palestinians, an insidious campaign to end UNWRA's operations is unfolding. The agency is facing a campaign to push it out of the occupied Palestinian territory, with Israel leading the charge to end UNWRA's activities in Gaza. We denounce Israel's actions and emphasize the imperative for granting the request to deliver aid to the entire Gaza Strip. South Africa strongly condemns the continuous targeting of UNWRA premises and staff since the beginning of the current Israeli war on Palestinians, and we deplore the killing of more than 190 of the agency's staff members. This is unacceptable. We stress the commitment of all partners to safeguard UNWRA's critical role now and within the framework of transition. The agency must be allowed to continue providing these essential services until a political solution is found. Mr. President, we note that based on current available funding and indications received from partners, UNWRA would not be able to sustain its operations and would only be able to sustain its operations until the end of August. After that, the agency will face a highly uncertain situation based on current forecasts. We therefore call on all member states and donor partners to fulfill their commitments and support to UNWRA. We welcome the decision by some states to resume their funding of UNWRA. We call on all other states that have not lifted their suspension to unfreeze funding to the agency. Mr. President, we seize this opportunity to reaffirm in these difficult, challenging, and tragic circumstances for the people of Palestine our firm commitment to the just resolution of the question of Palestine and the achievement of a just, comprehensive, and lasting peace in the region, consistent with UN resolutions and international law, and the realization of the two-state solution based on the pre-1967 lines. I thank you.
I thank the distinguished representative of South Africa for his statement, and I now give the floor to the distinguished representative of Armenia.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. At the outset, I would like to state that Armenia aligns itself with the statement of shared commitments on UNWRA initiated by a group of countries. Armenia is deeply concerned over the ongoing catastrophic humanitarian crisis in Gaza, where civilians are enduring dire conditions, bearing the brunt of the violence and deprivation. We emphasize the imperative of full compliance by all parties of conflicts to the 1949 Geneva Conventions and their additional protocols without any preconditions. Armenia acknowledges the indispensable role of the United Nations Relief and Works Agency for Palestine refugees in the Near East in addressing the humanitarian plight of the Palestinian people through providing life-saving assistance and ensuring access to education, healthcare, and social services in line with its mandate and humanitarian principles. We particularly stress the vital nature of humanitarian activities of UNWRA with the aim to respond to the critical humanitarian needs of the civilian population in Gaza, in particular the most vulnerable, children and women. Armenia supports strengthening the financial capacities of the agency to enable efficient, timely, and proper delivery of its mandated activities. To this end, the government of Armenia has made the decision to allocate $20,000 to UNWRA in support of its humanitarian efforts. Thank you.
I thank the distinguished representative of Armenia for her statement, and I now give the floor to the distinguished permanent representative of Portugal. You can, if you don't mind using the microphone in the next desk, or press the button, that's fine.
Okay, I'm sorry. Thank you, Mr. President. Let me start by commending UNWRA's constructive, stabilizing, and irreplaceable role in the region. The agency has been providing state-alike services such as education and health for 75 consecutive years, serving almost 6 million Palestinian registered refugees in the different states and 2 separate territories. This is a major achievement. I would like to underscore the importance of education in the current and incoming context in Gaza, and we fully support Commissioner General Lazzarini assessment in this regard. We cannot let down the Palestinian children who have survived 9 months of relentless bombings. I would like to take the opportunity to pay due tribute to the UNWRA staff killed, injured, and persecuted on the ground while pursuing their humanitarian mandate. We cannot normalize this appalling cycle of widespread and indiscriminate violence that jeopardizes future generations and perpetuates hate and confrontational cycle of violence between Palestinians and Israelis. Attacking UNWRA will only aggravate an already unbearable hardship for Palestinians, thus rendering any political stability unsurmountable. The agency displays a remarkable commitment to its unique mandate and serves as a beacon of hope to an entire population waiting for statehood. Despite its achievements, the agency is facing an ongoing dubious public campaign that cannot go unchecked. Hence, we underline that most of the UN member states support UNRWA's mandate, and we highlight the international consensus around the need to establish a political horizon based on the two-state solution. The agency is indispensable at this moment, and it will remain so until a final settlement of the Palestinian question is achieved. Mr. President, as the suspension of contributions to UNWRA was gaining momentum, Portugal stepped up, making an extraordinary contribution of 10 million euros, totaling 15 million euros donated to the agency over the last 9 months. Furthermore, in May, we have announced an additional contribution of 100,000 euros to help Palestinian refugees in Syria. The aforementioned contributions reflect our long-standing support to the agency and our understanding of the incommensurable needs that the Palestinian people are facing. Against this backdrop, we also joined the statement of shared commitments on UNWRA together with more than 100 countries, a timely initiative by Jordan, Kuwait, and Slovenia. We encourage all countries to lend their support to the agency. In closing, I reiterate Portugal's full support to UNWRA and its Commissioner General, Mr. Philippe Lazzarini, and we call for an immediate humanitarian permanent ceasefire in Gaza, which is the first step for a comprehensive and continuous scale-up of humanitarian aid into the Strip and to de-escalate the security situation in the region. I thank you.
I thank the distinguished permanent representative of Portugal for his statement, and I now give the floor to the distinguished representative of Chile.
Muchas gracias, señor presidente. Agradecemos la convocatoria a esta reunión. Tomamos nota de la presentación realizada por el secretario general y por el comisionado general de UNWRA. Asimismo, hemos escuchado con atención cada declaración de los otros Estados miembros. Los estremecedores relatos de lo que sucede en Gaza no nos pueden dejar indiferentes. Chile desea comenzar esta intervención expresando su total respaldo al delicado y valiente trabajo realizado por la agencia en la Franja de Gaza. Hacemos llegar nuestras más sentidas condolencias a las familias y seres queridos de todos los funcionarios humanitarios que han perecido durante este conflicto. Especialmente reconocemos a todos los funcionarios y las funcionarias de UNWRA por su abnegada labor en circunstancias tan dramáticas. Muchos de ellos siguen arriesgando sus vidas diariamente para poder seguir cumpliendo con las labores humanitarias, que son la única medida de supervivencia para la mayoría de la población de la Franja de Gaza. Jamás perpetró atentados el 7 de octubre que han sido ampliamente condenados. Nuestro país así lo hizo y sigue solicitando la liberación de los rehenes. Sin embargo, los incesantes bombardeos por parte de las fuerzas israelitas en la Franja de Gaza han provocado una tragedia de destrucción sin precedentes. Esto ha quedado evidenciado por los miles de civiles muertos y heridos, la mayoría de estos niños y mujeres, la gran cantidad de desplazados, hacinamientos en albergues, los caminos y carreteras inutilizados, la escasez de insumos básicos, corte de comunicaciones y la infraestructura sin capacidad de operación. Frente a esto es la UNRWA, que hace esfuerzos mancomunados para proveer en sus instalaciones la correspondiente cobijo y abrigo, y muchos de los cuales han sido también dañados por parte de Israel. Igualmente, dentro de las limitadas posibilidades actuales, la agencia brinda la asistencia alimentaria y sanitaria que es primordial para la subsistencia de miles de personas. Por cierto, el apoyo de la entrega de agua es fundamental. Subrayamos la función especial de UNRWA para millones de refugiados palestinos en necesidad que cuenten con los recursos correspondientes para llevar a cabo sus actividades. Reiteramos que la labor de la agencia no es sustituible. Por lo antes expuesto, comprendemos el rotundo respaldo que obtuvo el documento de compromisos compartidos de UNRWA, que fue publicado y que por supuesto mi país también apoyó. Agradecemos a Jordania, Kuwait y a la ONU por su liderazgo en esta iniciativa. A su vez agradecemos a Egipto, Jordania y al secretario general Guterres por la organización de la conferencia Call for Action en Oman en junio pasado. Por otra parte, por todo lo anterior, solicitamos a la comunidad internacional y especialmente a los donantes seguir comprometidos con UNRWA y salvar vidas y en algo remediar el profundo dolor del pueblo palestino. La financiación sostenible a largo plazo para la agencia es fundamental. Mi país entregará una contribución adicional a esta conferencia.
I thank the distinguished representative of Chile for his statement, and I now give the floor to the distinguished representative of Cuba.
Thank you,
Agradecemos la convocatoria a esta importante reunión sobre los anuncios de contribuciones voluntarias al organismo de obras públicas y socorro de las Naciones Unidas para los refugiados de Palestina en el cercano Oriente, así como la presencia del secretario general, del presidente de la Asamblea General y el comisionado general de UNRWA. Señor presidente, continúan en este minuto los ataques de las fuerzas israelíes con bombardeos aéreos, terrestres y marítimos en toda la franja de Gaza. Esto provoca víctimas civiles, desplazamientos y destrucción de estructuras e infraestructuras civiles. La ofensiva terrestre de las fuerzas israelíes continúa expandiéndose, con nuevas órdenes de evacuación que afectan a 1/4 de millón de personas, profundizan la crisis humanitaria y desestabilizan aún más los flujos de
further destabilize the flow of humanitarian aid. There's a severe shortage of medical supplies, which endangers essential medical aid. The number of patients is increasing daily, overcoming the capacity of hospitals. In addition to that, there's damaged infrastructure, insecurity, absence of food, fuel, drinking water, and basic services. Today, 1.9 million people throughout Gaza remain IDPs, including persons who have been displaced numerous times.
En estas condiciones se mantiene elaborando el Organismo de Obras Públicas y Socorro de las Naciones Unidas para los Refugiados de Palestina en el Cercano Oriente. La agencia mantiene su bandera erguida y su personal firme, a pesar de las numerosas víctimas que de entre sus miembros ha cobrado la arremetida israelí contra la Franja de Gaza y de las acciones hostiles que continuamente ejecuta Israel, la potencia ocupante, con el objetivo de aniquilar la labor del organismo. En estas circunstancias es sin duda admirable la labor que realiza UNWRA en el terreno, por lo cual merece que se rinda homenaje a su personal, que ha sabido hacer mucho con pocos recursos para llevar un mensaje de esperanza
limited resources to send a message of hope to patients, children, and adults. Its work in extreme conditions, which has been taking place in very hostile environment, are something that we have to acknowledge in our gratitude. Mr. Chairman, in our view, attempts to destabilize this important agency will only worsen the humanitarian disaster in Palestine.
Donde se ha producido un aumento de la violencia, la marginación, el desplazamiento y la pobreza, que ha afectado a millones de civiles y en especial a los refugiados de Palestina en las zonas de operaciones del organismo. Para los millones de refugiados palestinos que registra la agencia en Jordania, Líbano, Siria y en la ribera occidental ocupada, incluida Jerusalén Oriental, así como la devastada Franja de Gaza, la ausencia de una solución política al conflicto israelo-palestino de una parte y la carencia de los fondos necesarios con el consiguiente déficit financiero para atender los programas de atención establecidos por otra, causan una situación generalizada de preocupación y miedo acerca del futuro de estas poblaciones. Señor Presidente, corresponde ahora brindar todo el esfuerzo posible para que la labor de dicha agencia continúe en pie. Hacemos un llamado a los Estados miembros de la ONU a mostrar voluntad política, ahora más que nunca, a fin de garantizar una financiación más suficiente, previsible y sostenida para el organismo, con el objetivo de mantener su imprescindible labor y la ejecución de su mandato. Señor Presidente, nada puede justificar la barbarie y el genocidio que se comete hoy por parte de Israel contra el pueblo palestino. Aprovechamos este foro para reiterar nuestro reclamo para un cese al fuego inmediato y permanente, así como la entrega de ayuda humanitaria a Gaza sin restricciones. Cuba no estará entre los indiferentes. Apuntó recientemente el presidente de nuestro país en una locución sobre la situación en la Franja de Gaza. Muestra de ello es que hemos decidido sumar nuestra voz a la iniciativa acerca de compromisos compartidos sobre UNWRA como muestra de nuestro inquebrantable apoyo a la agencia, a su labor, al destino de los refugiados y en línea con la histórica posición de Cuba acerca del organismo. Reiteramos nuestro firme apoyo y solidaridad a la justa causa del pueblo palestino, así como la necesidad de redoblar los esfuerzos para resolver la difícil situación de sus refugiados de conformidad con las normas y principios del derecho internacional y con las resoluciones pertinentes de la ONU, trágicamente agravada desde la arremetida israelí contra la población palestina desde octubre pasado. Muchas gracias.
Thank you very much.
I thank the distinguished representative of Cuba for her statement, and I now give the floor to the distinguished representative of Sierra Leone.
Mr. Vice President, I thank the President of the General Assembly for convening this important meeting and for his statement this morning. I also thank His Excellency Antonio Guterres, Secretary General of the United Nations, and Mr. Philip Lazzarini, Commissioner General of UNWRA, for their statement and commitment to the mandate of UNWRA and alleviating the plight of the people of the State of Palestine. The people of the State of Palestine have endured long suffering, and UNWRA has been and continues to be a beacon of hope for Palestinian refugees since it was established by General Assembly Resolution 302 of 1949. Over the years, we have reviewed numerous reports and briefings on UNWRA operations, and they all testify to the organization's vital importance, as well as its resilience and commitment, which has seen it adapt to the changing needs of the population it serves. The agency's direct relief and work program, the provision of education, healthcare, and social services to millions of Palestinians
across Jordan, Lebanon, Syria, the Gaza Strip, the West Bank, including East Jerusalem, is a testament of its long-standing commitment to the welfare and human development of Palestinian refugees. Regrettably, UNWRA's ability to deliver at scale and provide adequate humanitarian assistance to civilians in the Gaza Strip and other locations have been severely affected over this past month due to the ongoing hostilities exacerbated by the breakdown of law and order and ensuing insecurity for humanitarian workers. We note the extraordinary commitment demonstrated by UNWRA and pay tribute to the almost 200 personnel who have lost their lives since the start of the conflict in the Gaza Strip. We express our deepest condolences to the families and stand in solidarity with those adversely impacted. Vice President, Sierra Leone acknowledges UNWRA's vital role as the mainstay of humanitarian response services to the people of Palestine. We emphasize that UNWRA cannot be replaced by any other agency or entity, as the work they do for the Palestinians, not only in Gaza but across the wider region, is life-saving and immeasurable. In further acknowledging the dire humanitarian situation in the Gaza Strip, aggravated by a state of famine and acute food insecurity, we therefore call on all member states to strengthen the operational capacity of UNWRA. We appeal for adequate, predictable, and sustained financial and other support for UNWRA and its services until a just and lasting solution to the plight of the Palestinian refugees is found. Recognizing the vital role of UNWRA through its emergency response in the occupied Palestinian territory and noting the huge funding gap at this crucial moment, the government of Sierra Leone affirms its political support to UNWRA and has signed on to the shared commitment. In addition, we will make a voluntary financial contribution to UNWRA to help support the continuity of its operations. In closing, Vice President, while I reiterate Sierra Leone's support for UNWRA, I equally emphasize the need for an immediate permanent ceasefire in Gaza, respect for and implementation of Security Council Resolutions 2712, 2720, 2728, and 2735, and also respect and implementation of the provisional orders of the International Court of Justice. This, inter alia, will allow the unhindered flow of humanitarian aid into all parts of the Gaza Strip, including the south to Rafah. To achieve lasting peace and security in the region, we echo the need for the resumption of political dialogue guided by the principles of the two-state solution, with Israel and Palestine living side by side in peace, security, stability, and dignity. I thank you.
I thank the distinguished permanent representative of Sierra Leone for his statement, and I now give the floor to the distinguished representative of Morocco.
سيد الرئيس، أود في البداية أن أشكر رئيس الجمعية العامة على عقد هذا الاجتماع الهام، كما أتوجه بالشكر لمعالي السيد أنطونيو غوتيريس الأمين العام للأمم المتحدة على إحاطته القيمة. تعرب المملكة المغربية عن مساندتها لوكالة الأونروا التي ظلت منذ 75 عاما قادرة على الاستمرار في أن تلعب دورا مهما في دعم التعليم والصحة والخدمات الاجتماعية لملايين من اللاجئين الفلسطينيين. كما تود أن تعرب المملكة المغربية عن تعازيها الحارة لأسر الشهداء من موظفي الوكالة الذين سقطوا وهم يؤدون واجبهم الإنساني في غزة. سيد الرئيس، تؤكد المملكة المغربية على الدور المحوري والهام لوكالة الأونروا وعدم إمكانية أن تقوم أي وكالة أو جهة أخرى بالدور الذي تلعبه هذه الوكالة في خدمة اللاجئين الفلسطينيين وفي دول الجوار. وتؤكد المملكة المغربية على أهمية دعم هذه الوكالة من أجل تمكينها من التوفر على الموارد اللازمة والكافية لأداء ولايتها النبيلة على أكمل وجه. كما تؤكد على ضرورة استمرار الأونروا في تقديم الخدمات للاجئين الفلسطينيين في
كافة مناطق العمليات الخمس إلى أن يتم التوصل إلى حل عادل لقضية اللاجئين الفلسطينيين. السيد الرئيس، تطالب المملكة المغربية مرة أخرى بفرض الوقف الفوري والمستدام لإطلاق النار في قطاع غزة كسبيل وحيد كفيل بإنهاء هذه المأساة الإنسانية، وضرورة ضمان حماية المدنيين وفقا للقانون الدولي والقانون الدولي الإنساني، وإطلاق سراح الأسرى والمحتجزين، وإرساء أفق سياسي للقضية الفلسطينية من أجل إقرار السلام العادل والشامل وتوفير الأمن والعيش الكريم لكل شعوب المنطقة. كما تطالب المملكة المغربية المجتمع الدولي بتسريع دخول وإيصال المساعدات الإنسانية للأشقاء الفلسطينيين في قطاع غزة بشكل آمن وكاف ومستدام وبدون عوائق، تنفيذا لقراري المجلس الأمن 27/12 و 27/20. ولهذه الغاية وفي إطار الالتزام الفعلي والاهتمام الدائم بصاحب الجلالة الملك محمد السادس نصره الله رئيس لجنة القدس بالقضية الفلسطينية، وبتعليمات سامية من جلالته، أطلقت المملكة المغربية مساعدات إنسانية واسعة النطاق للتخفيف من معاناة الفلسطينيين، وكان آخرها الشهر الماضي، والتي تهم توجيه مساعدات طبية إلى سكان قطاع غزة. وإذ تم توزيع المساعدات الطبية المغربية التي أمر صاحب الجلالة الملك محمد السادس رئيس لجنة القدس بتوجيهها إلى السكان الفلسطينيين بقطاع غزة، وأشرف الهلال الأحمر الفلسطيني الذي تسلم هذه المساعدات الطبية بمعبر كرم أبو سالم، والتي تتكون من 40 طنا من المواد الطبية تشمل على الخصوص معدات لعلاج الحروق والطوارئ الجراحية وجراحة العظام والكسور، وكذا أدوية أساسية. وتأتي هذه المساعدات لتؤكد الالتزام الفعلي والعناية الموصولة التي مارست يوليا صاحب الجلالة الملك محمد السادس نصره الله رئيس لجنة القدس للقضية الفلسطينية. كما تواصل وكالة بيت مال القدس الشريف بصفتها الذراع الميداني للجنة القدس في تأدية رسالتها في حماية المدينة المقدسة في إطار خطة سنوية تضع لها آليات الحكام المناسبة في تدبير الموارد وصرفها وفق مقاربة تشاركية مع أهل القدس ومع مؤسساتهم. وتتكفل المملكة المغربية بتمويل أكثر من 86% من ميزانية هذه الوكالة. السيد الرئيس، ختاما تجدد المملكة المغربية التأكيد على ضمانها تضامنها الكامل والشامل مع الحقوق المشروعة للشعب الفلسطيني الشقيق المبنية على الشرعية الدولية والمستندة إلى حق الدولتين المتوافق عليه من طرف المجتمع الدولي، والمفضية إلى قيام دولة فلسطينية مستقلة على حدود 4 يونيو 1967 عاصمتها القدس الشرقية.
I thank the distinguished representative of Morocco for her statement, and I now give the floor to the distinguished representative of Montenegro.
President, Mr. Commissioner General, I would like to thank you for convening this important event, given the immeasurable role of UNWRA in providing essential quality services to numerous Palestinian refugees in the region. UNWRA is working in incredibly difficult circumstances in Gaza, and a huge number, more than 100 of its staff, have been killed. In that regard, I want to offer my deepest condolences to the Commissioner General, Mr. Lazzarini. UNWRA remains pivotal in providing services, and it serves as a stabilizing force within the region and contributes significantly to the viability of the two-state solution. During these challenging times, UNWRA plays a fundamental role in mitigating the impact of conflict on energy and food prices, particularly in Gaza and poverty-stricken areas. Montenegro expresses profound gratitude to UNWRA and its host countries for their indispensable contributions of the well-being, protection and human development of the Palestine refugees. We acknowledge the dedicated staff of UNWRA who consistently achieve remarkable results in challenging environment. Also, Montenegro welcomes the conclusions of the independent review led by Madame Colonna and looking forward for their implementation. Montenegro supports UNWRA's important work with annual financial contributions. In addition to this, allow me to remind you that last year Montenegro donated additional $400,000 to help vulnerable civilian population in Gaza. Therefore, I am delighted to announce that this year as well, the government of Montenegro pledges a contribution of US $10,000 for UNWRA for 2024. While modest, this contribution reflects our commitment to humanitarian principles, regional stability, and assisting vulnerable populations in assessing essential services. We firmly believe that UNWRA will continue its invaluable mission and positively impact the lives of millions of Palestinian refugees amidst these multi-faced challenges. I thank you.
I thank the distinguished representative of Montenegro for his statement. I now give the floor to the Deputy Permanent Observer of the Holy See. The floor is yours, Monsignor.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. My delegation would like to take this opportunity to reiterate its support for the mandate of the United Nations Relief and Work Agency for Palestine refugees in the Near East, particularly in light of the current circumstances. It is with great sadness that we reflect on the tragic events that have unfolded in Israel and in Palestine since the atrocious terroristic attack against the Israeli population on October 7th last year. These developments have had a profoundly negative impact on the lives of countless innocent individuals. The Holy See would like to reiterate the crucial role of UNWRA in addressing the basic needs of over 5 million Palestinian refugees in the Middle East, especially in the context of the ongoing catastrophic humanitarian crisis in the Gaza Strip. Consequently, the Holy See reaffirms its pledge of financial support and encourages all member states to contribute to UNWRA or resume contributions in order to support the agency's crucial efforts. In the meantime, the Holy See considers it of the utmost importance to preserve and promote the neutrality of UNWRA in order to fulfill its mandate in accordance with Resolution 302 of December 1949. Mr. President, my delegation would like to highlight the following. The Holy See urges the parties involved in the hostilities in Gaza to engage in constructive dialogue on peace proposals, including the one outlined in Security Council Resolution 2735. The Holy See calls for a ceasefire on all fronts, the immediate release of the Israeli hostages in Gaza, the unhindered delivery of essential aid to the Palestinian people, and respect for international humanitarian law by all parties involved, without exception. In this context, the Holy See calls for the reopening of all Gaza's entry points to facilitate the delivery of the much-needed humanitarian assistance, including food, water, and medicine, to the suffering population in Gaza. It also emphasizes the importance of an orderly distribution of food and supplies, with particular attention being paid to children and the needy. Furthermore, the Holy See reiterates that in any conflict, places that must guarantee the protection of the civilian population, such as schools, hospitals, and places of worship, and UN agencies' facilities, cannot be used for or be targeted by military operations. It is incumbent upon all parties to ensure the safety of humanitarian personnel who are engaged in tireless efforts to assist those in need. Mr. President, I would be remiss if I did not conclude with the recent compelling appeal of Pope Francis, and I quote, "All of us must work and commit ourselves to achieving a lasting peace, where the state of Palestine and the state of Israel can live side by side, breaking down the walls of enmity and hatred. We must all cherish Jerusalem so that it will become the city of fraternal encounter among Christians, Jews, and Muslims, protected by a special internationally guaranteed status." Thank you, Mr. President.
I thank the Deputy Permanent Observer of the Holy See for his statement, and I now give the floor to the Permanent Observer of the European Union.
President, Commissioner General, the European Union, as UNWRA's largest by far donor, acknowledges the opportunity to close today's UNWRA pledging conference. The EU reiterates its appreciation for the invaluable role that UNWRA plays in delivering essential services to Palestinian refugees. The EU is also grateful for the critical contribution of host countries to the well-being, protection, and human development of Palestinian refugees. UNWRA is not simply a lifeline for Palestinian refugees, it is a cornerstone of regional stability. With more than 5.9 million registered Palestinian refugees under its care, UNWRA's work, particularly in education and healthcare, is vital to ensure that human rights and dignity are upheld. The European Union is deeply concerned with the efforts and initiatives to undermine and minimize the role and activities of UNWRA. This June, the 27 EU heads of state and government unanimously stressed that, quote, the services of UNWRA provides in Gaza and across the region are essential, unquote, and condemned, quote, any attempts to label a UN agency as a terrorist organization. The European Union commends UNWRA for its clear response with regard to accusations against its staff participating in the 7th October terrorist attacks against Israel, and to concerns raised regarding its neutrality. It welcomes the development by the agency of an action plan to implement the recommendations of the independent review group led by Ms. Catherine Colonna. The EU will engage in collaborative efforts with all relevant shareholders to safeguard UNWRA's neutrality and ensure the integrity of humanitarian assistance for Palestinian refugees. The EU also looks forward to the conclusion of the investigative report of the Office of Internal Oversight Services. In the framework of the EU contribution to the agency's program budget, the EU and UNWRA have agreed on specific neutrality actions, such as enhancing in its DIOS and ethics departments. UNWRA is implementing these actions effectively. Recognizing UNWRA's invaluable role and work, the EU, together with EU member states, is UNWRA's top donor, providing approximately $500 million annually, amounting to over 40% of UNWRA's budget. Time and again, the EU and EU member states have been among the first to respond to UNWRA calls for additional financial resources to maintain critical services. To conclude, the EU reiterates its unwavering support for UNWRA. We call upon the international community to join us in our efforts. Increased funding for UNWRA is crucial to maintaining its vital services and to ensuring that the agency can effectively fulfill its important role. Together, we can make a tangible difference in the lives of millions of Palestinians, and indeed, we must. Thank you, Mr. President.
I thank the distinguished representative of the European Union for his statement. Excellencies, distinguished representatives, we have just listened to the last speaker on the list for the 2024 UNWRA Pledging Conference. But before we close, permit me the indulgence of making a few observations. Commissioner General Lazzarini and my friends, on the 22nd of last month, I personally visited the UNWRA Baka camp for Gazan refugees. As chairman of the special committee heading the Israeli practices on occupied Arab lands. During this visit, the special committee met with UNWRA staff, educational and medical personnel, refugees, children, and Gazan families. The special committee, what we saw, met with during this visit, particularly we saw the unimaginable painful circumstances that they were going through. The committee was appalled by the ongoing smear campaign that is being directed towards UNWRA, notwithstanding the great work they are engaging in, and the suspension of financial contributions. To date, we learned on that visit that 193 of your workers, Commissioner General, have been killed in the current conflict, with family members and loved ones also perishing in the continuous bombing of Gaza. UNWRA, Excellencies, provides some of the most essential services and is the only organization equipped with providing the much-needed humanitarian aid to the people of Gaza. Moreover, UNWRA, as the custodian of the Palestinian people's right to return, is essential to the Palestinian self-determination and the realization of their human rights, which are currently subjugated and denied. The Special Committee noted that the international community, which we can see today, stands in solidarity with UNWRA. The Special Committee had also the privilege of meeting with students who are members of the UNWRA School Parliament, including children from Gaza, who spoke eloquently about the lack of accountability and impact the war was having on people's trust in human rights, multilateralism, and the rules-based order. Many of the children also had family members and friends who were killed. All had been affected. The children simply asked us the question, why is this happening to us? My dear friends, I'll leave you with this thought. To answer that question, why is this happening to us? And I would strongly recommend that we all support UNWRA unconditionally in its quest to uplift